Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and we'll get started. Chief Justice Melton, if you come on up, we're ready for you, sir. Good morning, everybody. We're glad to see you this morning. Nice. I know we made it nice and cool in here where you can stay awake. Part of the plan.
62 degrees in the office downstairs this morning.
How you doing, sir? How you doing?
It felt warm.
Yeah, I'm tough.
They get y'all's heat fixed.
A little bit, yeah.
Still up that apartment, 64.
Tell me your name again. Good to see you.
I bought me an electric,
Blanket.
a little half a electric blanket. All right, thank you, sir. Good morning, Judge Melton. Good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman.
Floor is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, please give your attention to Judge Melton. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and jump in. It's an honor, as always, to be in front of you and in front of this body. As I understand it, you would like to hear about the budget presentation from the Supreme Court and then also of the Judicial Council, and I'll try to do both. We typically like to separate the two because there are some distinctions or major distinctions. I don't want the two to be confused, but I'll happily cover both. To begin with the Supreme Court, on behalf of my colleagues and on behalf of the judges on the Court of Appeals, thank you. Thank you again for that beautiful building that you have provided to us. We do not take that for granted. We thank you for your dedication and commitment to the Nathan Deal Judicial Center, the first building in the state dedicated to the appellate courts. Also want you to know that in addition to our court and the Court of Appeals, in that building we have the Court of Report of Decisions. That's the office that actually publishes all the decisions in the hard books and sends those decisions out to the online services that publish our opinions. They also do all the spading and detail editing of the opinions before they go out. And also is the Office of Bar Admissions that does all the testing for lawyers to be admitted to the practice of law. A couple of dates that I hope you already have on your calendar. I want to go over these with you just to make sure you know about them and hopefully you can attend. On January 29th, we have the legislative breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning. January 29th at 7 o'clock in the morning. We want you to come. We want you to eat a little bit with us, but more importantly, we want to show you around the building. We want to show you what you have committed yourselves to, and hopefully you get a feel for what we've done and what you have done. We also want to show off some of the work that the inmates have done within the building with respect to furniture. Also on February 11th at 10:30 will be a dedication program. We have a guest speaker. That guest speaker will be Georgia's own Justice Clarence Thomas. And so he'll be speaking. We'll be outside February 11th, so dress warm. We wanted to accommodate everybody. And so February 11th, 10:30, Clarence Thomas. So please be there, and we look forward to celebrating officially ordaining the building. As far as budget is concerned, our budget items, our first items are largely pedestrian. We have requests for copiers in each of the chambers. You'll see how the building's laid out. The designers saw fit to put a copier in each chamber, so you'll see the budget request for that in an amount of $18,000. Other items that we've requested relate to cybersecurity. That's a big item for the judiciary. It's a big item for statewide. As you know, speaking to the other aspects of the judiciary, the administrative office of the courts had been attacked earlier last year. Spent a good bit of the year recovering from that attack. So the Supreme Court is also responsible for making sure that we maintain security within our system. And so three of our requests actually deal with that. One of those requests is an endpoint detection response service. That's a malware and server protection device that calls for us to ask for $9,250. As I understand this in IT terms, this basically keeps rogue programs from running on the system. Then we also have requested a web application firewall in the amount of $10,000, and this, of course, catches and prevents attacks in the first instance. Just by way of example, we had a 24-hour period last year with the Office of Bar Admissions where we had 8,000 attacks. 8,000 attacks within a 24-hour window on the Office of Bar Admissions. That's just one piece of the operations that our IT staff supervises. As on a side note, we also have had many discussions about cybersecurity insurance. The executive branch has been able to procure through the Department of Administrative Services a global comprehensive cyber insurance package. The judiciary is more complicated, but we're making strides to go down that path. So we have created a task force, a cybersecurity task force that's chaired by Judge Coomer, who, as you know, is a reformed legislator. So he's chairing that initiative, and the idea is to figure out how to define the risk that exists within the judiciary that can be bundled and packaged in a comprehensive program, comprehensive policy. And so it's more complicated within the judiciary because, as you know, we have a mixture of state and local and county entities, but that initiative is ongoing, and we hope to report back to you shortly. Also in that supplemental request is the online research fee, the service that we have for Westlaw for $6,000, and then one-time printing and stationery and signage associated with the new building in the amount of $25,000. So that's the supplemental request. As it relates to the big budget, again, you'll see the copiers, you'll see the same amounts for the cybersecurity items and also for the Westlaw research. There's a new item which is really a placeholder. As you know, probably Justice Benham has updated, he's moved forward his time for departure. He'll be leaving our court at the end of February, beginning of March. And as a side note, to that side note, I want to add that we will sorely miss him, but I personally cannot express enough gratitude for his service to our state and what he means to me personally, what he means to our judiciary and moving us to the modern era that we're able to enjoy right now. But as it relates to budget, it just means that if the governor appoints a justice on the court who qualifies for the per diem mileage, we need a placeholder in the budget in order to be able to provide that reimbursement for mileage. So that's all that is. And that's in the amount of $10,000 for potential mileage reimbursement for whoever might replace Justice Benham in the event that they qualify. You see a request for a IT position. This is a lower level IT position, $59,000 salary plus fringe. This again is related to the cybersecurity items that we discussed earlier. It would not be purely for cybersecurity, but it will also provide additional coverage and support for maintaining the computer work that we have ongoing. We provide the backup for not just our offices, the Supreme Court, but also the Board of Bar Examiners, and all the testing that takes place, and also for the reporter of decisions. You'll see the request for a personnel manager. Yeah, HR personnel manager. So this is something that's new. The Senate Budget Office in particular, Mr. Chairman, your office, has been asking our court and the Court of Appeals to think outside the box a little bit as we look at new positions. And the idea is that is whether we can share positions between the two courts. There's some similarities, some synergies that might be able to be gained. Not unlike what the House and Senate might do in some of its back office operations. So we've been asked to consider how we can combine services. the Department of Audits conducted an audit and looked at how we operate and how the Court of Appeals operates, and they came up with a list of recommendations. And so with this HR position, that's one of the items that they identified as something that might be shared, and we agreed. The Court of Appeals does not have an HR position. We don't have an HR position, and rather than each one ask for one, we've gotten together and both have asked for a joint position to be shared in each other's budget. This is also consistent with a report that just came out. One of the things that we did within the judiciary, we created a anti-sexual harassment task force, and that was chaired by Justice Warren. And she issued her report. The committee that she chaired issued its report at the end of December. And among the recommendations is to make sure that there is a centralized person to report your sexual harassment to. And so this person would obviously be the prime suspect for that role. We don't anticipate that being full-time receiving sexual harassment complaints, but that would be part of what those duties would entail. And then similarly, we have a shared payroll coordinator requested in the budget. Other items in the budget are pass-through or formalized items. You see the increased rent, which is based on the allocation from the Department of Georgia Building Authority of $118,000, and then the pass-through from the National Center for State Courts. So those are items in our big budget. Let me shift gears to the Judicial Council. The Judicial Council has two requests, one in the supplemental and one in the big budget. In the supplemental request, we have a request for $375,000 for kinship care. Now, kinship care was asked for last year. We asked for $750,000, and the discussions that we had through the legislative process went along the lines of maybe we'll give you half, and then you come back in the supplemental budget and ask for justification show your justification for the other half. So we received $375,000 last year. Now the Judicial Council is coming back to you asking for the other half, and we want to make the case for why $375,000 is appropriate. I handed handouts to the head table up here, and if anybody else wants copies of this handout, we're happy to make those available to you. But kinship care is essentially the Judicial Council's effort through the AOC to provide legal assistance, legal help to people to formalize the relationships they have to children that they're basically taking in. Oftentimes those children are grandchildren, or they're the neighbor's kids, or the niece or nephew. And rather than these kids going into foster care, if we can help formalize the relationship and help provide the paperwork and certification materials so that they can actually operate in that capacity, we think we're saving the state some money. So one of the things you'll see is that AOC has been able to distribute the $375,000 through Atlanta Legal Aid and Georgia Legal Services. They have touched 623 kids, 623 cases. We project that 70% of those cases are cases that we have saved from going to foster care. We make that assumption based on the fact that 70% of those cases are cases that formalize adoptions. And by formalizing those adoptions, we believe we're avoiding sending kids to foster care. We've been able to do that by spending $475 per case on average, $475 per case. And if that's all it takes to avoid sending a kid to foster care, we think that's money well spent. Also want to emphasize that that money and these cases are statewide. 79 counties have been served by this program, and 75% of the kids served are outside of the metro Atlanta area. We think it's a very important program. We're excited about it. We've been impressed with how Atlanta Legal Aid and Georgia Legal Services have been able to rev up this quickly to provide these critical services. And we look forward to more conversations and more detailed conversations with you about that going forward. In the big budget, we have a request for a business support analyst, and this will work solely and exclusively on the workload assessment aspect of what the Judicial Council does. You, as a legislative body, have been really good to work with us in being very formulaic and methodical in how we recommend new judgeships. We have been able to convince you that that's a very database process, and these are the people that do that. The result of you being so dedicated to that empirical analysis is that we get a lot more questions now about the math, the science, and the process, and you wanting more information. We're happy to provide that, but it does take more work. We've also been able to have more discussions about a methodical process to see what work, where jurisdictions might be overjudged is the phrase. So we've been happy to work with you, and we're glad that you have that interest in making sure that we have an orderly process, but we do need more help as we continue to delve into these questions and provide you the information that you're asking for on a regular basis. So that request is for an amount of $87,145. And then the last thing I want to mention before I pause and take any questions that you might have is I understand that there are some proposed cuts to the Council of Accountability Courts. And there, my only word of caution is that for every dollar cut, there very well might be some additional cost. We might be directing people to more expensive and less efficient alternatives. And with that, I'll pause and ask if there are any questions or comments on anything that's been presented.
All right, questions for Representative Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chief Justice, Presiding Justice. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning to your staff that's here today supporting you. Thank you for your service to the state. I have a few questions, if I might. The first one being that since the jurisdictional shift of decision-making from the Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court, how has that enabled the Supreme Court to better address death penalty cases, also provide guidance to the bar and to the individuals of the state relevant to the precedent-making decisions that the Supreme Court has over Court of Appeals or trial court decisions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I didn't mention who I have with me. I do have our Presiding Justice, David Namis. I have our Clerk of Court, Ms. T. Barnes, and our Fiscal Affairs, the Fiscal Director, Ms. Regina Jones. To your question, thank you. The jurisdictional shift where the legislature moved certain jurisdictional items like divorce out of the Supreme Court to the Court of Appeals freed the Supreme Court to deal with larger, more constitutional items, but also more murder cases. So the thought was that conceptually, with the amount of jurisdictional items that shifted to the Court of Appeals, we would have thought that our caseload would have gone down. And in fact, it went up. And the reason why it went up is because we have direct appeals, and those direct appeals are murder cases, cases that come to us automatically whether we ask for them or not. And for some reason, our direct appeals are extremely high. They just skyrocketed. So the first answer is the jurisdictional shift happened just in time, because had it not happened, we'd have been drowning. But because it happened, we were able to do what you just said, was manage the direct appeals, but also pay more attention to cert petitions, cases where the parties have asked us to review what's happened at the Court of Appeals level. And so our cert petitions, we increased the granted cert petitions agreement to hear cases from the Court of Appeals by 10%, 7%, somewhere along those levels. We're getting more cert petitions. The depth and the complexity of those cases is increasing. We think we're able to dig into those cases more efficiently and effectively because of the jurisdictional shift. Overall, I think it's working very well, and I think it will put us in the right path going forward as we continue to grow as a state.
Mr. Chairman, may I follow up? Given that that's provided greater access to the the decision-making power of the Supreme Court. I do have some concerns and reservations about where we stand as a state in terms of access to our courts for citizens that are seeking redress in the form of a declaration that a government action is not constitutional or is not legal. That's a doctrine called sovereign immunity that is recognized by our courts to bar many, if not most, lawsuits brought by citizens against their government seeking that redress. Could you explain what impact that has had to that accessibility to the courts, in your opinion, because that's important fundamentally to gaining access to justice and access to the decision-making power that the judiciary provides?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, sovereign immunity is embedded in our Constitution, and it starts with the notion that you can't sue the state. It's a difficult question for me to get into as a member of our court, because we've issued decisions about where the lines are as far as what it takes for a citizen to be able to sue the state. And we are trained, and we try not to get into discussions about the nuances of how that works beyond what's actually laid out in our opinions. That said, the Constitution does lay out this general bar, and then it entrusts upon the General Assembly to strike the right balance as to when and how somebody might effectuate a remedy against the state.
Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Chief Justice, thank you for being here today. I just wanted to thank you for what you all are doing with the kinship care. Those families got to have basic stuff, even to put a child in school and that kind of thing. And by doing this, you help them, and you also help the children have a more stable environment. So I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Justice, thank you for being here this morning. Also, as do many of us in the legislature, I know besides just writing opinions, you wear many hats.
Yes, sir.
On councils and whatnot to make our judicial system work well. One of those recently you need congratulations for as to how we've tried to bring the courts technology-wise into the modern age with our civil e-filing system.
Yes, sir.
The mountain of paperwork that lawyers produce, I think, has gone down a little bit because we figured out a way that they can send that electronically rather than by the old-fashioned paper way. My inquiry goes into the second phase of that that I see, and that is expanding that e-filing, that not using paper, into the criminal part. Yes, of the justice system. I know when we had to make these decisions on the civil side, we bantered around the idea, should we form a government agency to do this, or should we turn to the private sector and partner with them? We decided to turn to the private sector and take that great technology minds out there, so to speak, that exists, and that's been very successful. So what I would ask of you is, will the courts, particularly in your leadership role, take a look at the criminal justice side and maybe shifting gears to look at the success we had on the civil side, and maybe rather than doing it through a government agency, let the private sector help us accomplish that with some of the monies that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. I can give you an update on what's happening in that space. There's been really a good amount of work already. A program called CJEP, Criminal Justice Exchange Project, that is attempting to do just that, which is to provide electronic filing on the criminal side. And one of the reasons why it's more important in the criminal side is because data gets transmitted from law enforcement to the sheriff's office, to the public defender, to the prosecutor, to the court, to the Department of Corrections, to pardons and parole, to probation, and sometimes that data is not consistent. If people have to transmit it and re-enter or rewrite something. But with a comprehensive system, that data transfers automatically and seamlessly without data entry errors. So you don't have the problem of somebody sitting in corrections for extra 6 months because somebody thought it was a 8 instead of a 2 or something like that. But you see the number of players that are involved in having a system like that, and those players, exists at the local level, at the county level, and at the state level. So CJEP has tried to create a common language that all the systems, no matter what you have, can speak to one another and populate everybody's database automatically. So there are 4 pilot projects that have been successful in implementing this program, and it shows great promise in those four circuits. The trick is, you know, how can we go live and go broader than that? So I appreciate that, and that'd be the next big thing to really move our judiciary forward. I agree with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to thank you for the kinship care because it is working, but I'm having more incidences of adults. Senior adults are being abused, and we're looking and having fights within families. And does that apply for elder care or only for children?
This is only for children.
All right, thank you.
Seems to be all the questions, Mr. Chief Justice. We appreciate you coming today. Appreciate your service, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you, if you're not a member of the committee and you see a committee member standing in the back, I'd appreciate it if you give up your seat. The committee members, by serving on the committee, commit to time, and we appreciate them being here, and they need to be able to have a seat. So if you're not a committee member and you're sitting in a seat, we'd appreciate you giving that up to a committee member. Mr. Ward, come on up. We're ready for you, sir. Hey, buddy. Into the prison. Ladies and gentlemen in the back, if you'll get in or out. Just doorkeeper, if you get that door shut, we'd appreciate it. Please give your attention to Commissioner Ward. Commissioner Ward, we're glad to have you this morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to kind of introduce my team real quick. I've been commissioner for a little over a year now, and so I've made some organizational changes. Recently, I promoted Ricky Meyer to my chief of staff right there. Also, I promoted Ahmed Holt. He's now the assistant commissioner for facility operation for the state of Georgia, so he handles all the day-to-day for all the state prisons. We have Alan Watson, who's my CFO and deputy of admin. We have Randy Sauls, who's my assistant commissioner for health services, and has Jay Sanders, who's my assistant commissioner for inmate services. So those are basically my core guys who really handle a lot of things for me. And first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity this morning to present the Georgia Department of Corrections amended fiscal year 20 and FY 21 budget overview. First of all, I would like to start by providing an overview of key metrics for the Georgia Department of Corrections. We presently have 34 state prisons, 8 detention centers, 13 transition centers, 4 private prisons, 22 county facilities, 11 RSAT facilities, and the RSAT is that residential substance abuse treatment program, and we also have 2 integrated treatment facilities, and those facilities are for those individuals who have a dual diagnosis, a mental health and a substance abuse issue. Presently, our current inmate population right now is 53,670 offenders in my charge. Of those 53,000 offenders, 71% of those offenders were convicted for a violent crime or a sex offense. We have 14,806 validated gang members in our charge, okay? The current length of sentence is just over 12 years for those offenders in my charge. 60% of the offender population is serving a sentence of 15 years or more. Of those 53,000 offenders, we have 9,421 that are serving life sentences. And of those 9,421, 1,635 are serving a sentence of life without parole. We also have 11,926 offenders that have a mental health diagnosis. Of those, 13,000 in our charge has a chronic illness, meaning they either have heart disease, diabetes, respiratory infection, COPD, cancer, or HIV. We issue out or dispense over 106,000 prescriptions per month to those offenders alone. Next slide. As you will see, the inmate population has begun to increase since the low of in 2014. This can be attributed to inmates that have been convicted of a violent crime or sex offense, resulting in longer sentences and length of stay with us. We're expecting our population to grow by 1,500 in the next 5 years. You'll see the next slide is our recidivism rate since 1972. Recidivism rates have held fairly steady over the last 10 to 15 years. Recidivism rates is the 3-year felony reconviction rate of related offenders. Our most current recidivism rate is 28.4%. Next is that we're going to talk to a slide about some of the initiatives that we're doing in the Georgia Department of Corrections to reduce the violence in the state prisons. 71% of the inmates in our charge are serving a sentence for a violent or a sex crime. The more violent population requires new management strategies by me and my staff. The department has implemented several initiatives to manage this population. One of the initiatives I would like to discuss is the creation of the Security Threat Group for Security Threat Group sergeants. The department created the Security Threat Group process to evaluate inmates to determine potential threats, including gang participation. Effective January 1st of 2019, the department deployed STD sergeants in every facility around the state. They are trained in the process of evaluating inmates to determine their security threat level and gang affiliations. Since this inception, this has led to over 63% increase in the number of inmates that have a validated gang affiliation in our department. Next, we're going to talk about mental health a little bit. 20% of the GDC offenders are being treated for a diagnosed mental health condition in the department right now. GDC has expanded mental health service to 4 more state prisons to accommodate the growing mental health population. That's additional 300 beds. Those facilities are Dooley, Smith, Telfair, and Ware State Prison. My long-term goal is to have all level 5 facilities, and our level 5 facilities, our close custody facilities, to have some sort of mental health component there. Additionally, a strategic initiative that I started is for every GDC employee to receive basic mental health training with a minimum of 8 hours of follow-up training annually. So we're getting everybody in the department involved in mental health, because mental health is a growing crisis for the Georgia Department of Correction. Next, one of the ways you're probably saying with the growing prison population, how we're combating those individuals who really say, I want to get out of prison gangs. What we started is what's called evidence-based prisons. The evidence-based prison program is designed to create a cultural change within the prison environment, focused on staff training, building community partnerships, and peer mentoring to increase inmates' pro-social thinking habits and self-concepts among the offender population. This two-year, 4-phase program encourages the offender to reinvent themselves and discover a positive new identity. This identity encourages family reunification, positive thinking, and action. The overall intent is to change their behavior and return to society as a productive citizen. A major component of this program is the gang renunciation program. All offenders that are validated as STG at our evidence-based prison participate in the Identity Reformation course, which is a cognitive behavior program monitored by the STG sergeants, geared toward forming a new identity. While in the program and after completion, the STG sergeants continue to monitor all STG offenders that have completed the Identity Reformation course to ensure that gang activity has ceased. Upon completion of the Identity Reformation course and a clear record of no gang activity, offenders have an opportunity to renounce their gang affiliation if they choose to. 52 offenders have renounced their gang affiliation so far since the inception in 2019. Research indicates that this treatment approach has the highest return on reducing recidivism. These programs have already shown a reduction in assaults and disciplinary reports by program participation. And it's going so well in the department, we have facilities just calling, can we be an evidence-based prison, because they're hearing results that are happening around the state. Next, next slide is our education update. We know with the large gang population, we got to make sure we keep this population engaged and busy. And we're so proud of this slide. And I want to thank our education partners, technical schools throughout the state of Georgia, and Foothills Charter High School. Total enrollment in academic courses for the fiscal year 2019 was over 21,948 offenders. There were over 30,000 enrollments in career and technical programs for the fiscal year 2019. The department awarded 2,935 GEDs in the fiscal year 2019. This represents 29% of all GEDs awarded in the state for the fiscal year 2019. Career and technical completions increased by over 189% from fiscal year 2018 through 2019. We also had 85 high school students, had 87 high school diplomas were awarded in fiscal year 2019, with over 300 graduates since inception, meaning that an offender that's 22 years or less, if he wants to get a high school diploma, through Foothills Charter High School, they can get a high school diploma. Also, GDC has partnered with DDS to provide an initiative about supplying secured identification to those releasing offenders back into society. Since its inception in 2016, we've issued over 25,712 driver license or state IDs to offenders, 42,483 birth certificates, 28,110 Social Security cards. So we're making sure they had that identification in their hand when they were released from our facility so they will not reoffend. Next, I would like to review our amended FY20 and FY21 budget submissions. These are detailed on pages 141 through 145 of the governor's recommendation. Budget changes for amended fiscal year 20 is a total reduction of $45,788,219. For fiscal year 21 is a total reduction of $56,715,448. My goal with this budget submission was to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization by leveraging technology and eliminating duplication of services through improved business processes to ensure our core mission was accomplished. For expediency, we have consolidated our budget recommendation to categories. We can provide more detail on specific items during the subcommittee meetings. First, the statewide changes. Amended fiscal year 20 saw an increase of $942,844 in self-insurance premiums. FY21 saw a reduction of $1,742,280 for TRS, GETS assessments, and cybersecurity insurance. FY21 statewide, we saw $10,845,690 for team members making $40,000 or less. Currently, over 6,800 staff are eligible for a recruitment and retention increase, and that's real big shot in the arm for the Georgia Department of Corrections. Also, we're leveraging technology. Timekeeping. Our current system does not provide real-time management information for managers and supervisors to monitor hours worked. In fiscal year 19, we spent over $26 million in FLSA overtime payout. The department piloted Chronos in one location that resulted in over 50% drop in FLSA overtime at one facility. The department has started the transition to Chronos and will be completed by the early fiscal year 21. The total fiscal 21 savings are projected to be $16,847,802 projected savings. As we continue about leveraging technology, we're going to talk about virtual courts. GDC currently transports offenders to and from court for more than 544 hearings per year, which equals about 39,800 round trips. Video conferences for these hearings, as well as many more cases, provide savings and other benefits. When we talk about those 35,800 miles of round trips, we're talking about 2 correction officers both ways with those individuals. Or either you're talking about a road deputy in a small community being brought out of that community, come to our facility to pick somebody up and take him back to court. With the virtual court, we're eliminating a lot of that back and forth movement, and also we're enabling those local small communities that road deputy can spend his time in that community helping that public defend and do what they need to do. We're projecting a savings in the amended FY20 budget of $1.3 million, and for fiscal year 2021, we're projecting almost a $3 million savings by going to the virtual court. And again, some of the benefits are significant savings in staff time and productivity, reducing the need for security coverage for court hearings, decreasing risk of transporting inmates to court, improved safety for staff and court visitors, and fuel and vehicle maintenance savings by not having that vehicle on and off that road. The implementation status right now, we have 8 of 49 judicial circuits that are currently holding video hearings. Our goal is to have 50% of all circuits on board by June the 30th, 2020. Streamlining business processes. The department analyzed our business processes and identified areas where we could consolidate administrative processes and eliminate unnecessary tasks. Amended FY20 savings, we're projecting $34,830,229 by streamlining those processes. In fiscal year 20, we're projecting savings of $41,558,611. All affected employees were offered a mission-critical position. Only 23 employees chose not to take those jobs offered in those critical mission positions and decided to leave the department. And out of all of those, only 23 employees were affected. Facility management. Albany TC was closed. The facility in Albany was in disrepair. The roof leaked, had mold, had structural issues. 38 staff were transferred to other positions in the area, and 112 male inmates were transferred to other transition centers in the area. The amended FY20 savings for that move alone was $1,562,175. The fiscal 21 savings projected to be $3,124,157 by making that move. Also, we're completion of the Metro Reentry Facility Phase 3. That's going to be 2 more reentry dormitories and TC dorms. So we're filling the void of closing that Albany TC by opening up the Metro TC with 2 dormitories, and that's going to be over 400 additional beds. Operating funding for that is $7,197,555. Next was revenue increases to other funds offsetting state appropriations. Work details. Amended FY20, $1,106,000 for the amended FY20. For FY21, $4,916,258. Current reimbursement rate does not cover current cost of our COs on those details. This increase will cover actual cost of the COs on those details. Commissary. Amended FY20, we increased the commissary by $1,482,897. In fiscal year 21, we're going to increase that by $3,549,377. That's only an increase of 2 cents per item on items sold in the store. The average pricing is a minimum of 40% less than what is the regular retail price of those items in the real world. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. If you would like to answer any questions at this time, if there are any questions.
Representative Jones.
Yes, my question is, do you have any plans for Butler in Taylor County?
Thank you, Ms. Patty Bentley, for answering that question. as always, we look at our non-enduring facilities for options. And I can assure you, Butler is near and dear to my heart. That was my first assignment as a superintendent with the Western Probation and Detention Center. And every time we show a facility, we show the Butler facility, and hopefully something will materialize in the near future with that facility.
Representative Al Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to have you here, Mr. Commissioner. I hadn't seen this many people on the wall since crossover. You brought the cadre out.
I need a lot of support, sir.
And this is not a Taylor County question. While looking through the budget, I need some clarification. I saw a $2.5 million increase for private prisons. And would you dwell on that? Let us know what is it? What is it? Is it for operational costs? Is it, what is it exactly?
It's an operational cost for the correction officer for those facilities. Yes, yes.
It's operational costs. Yes. Okay, and thank you for the secured ID program. It's real. It was a real problem. People getting out of prison with no ID. It's a one-way ticket back. So thank you for that and for the gang initiative program.
Thank you.
Representative Smyrie.
Commissioner, mental health, when you were talking about that, that just struck me. Give me a little dive on that, the numbers and the sector. I was talking to a colleague the other day and another state, and he informed me that the mental health section of their prison was the largest mental health facility in the state.
Yes.
And that was alarming to me as well. So give me a comparison as to our mental health sector and what we're trying to do about it. And your statement was that it continues to grow and it's growing, your mental health sector. So give me a little, give us a little dose of, when you say it's growing, I mean, what, exponentially or just?
It's growing. As you see, I think we have a 20% increase in our mental health intake. We are somewhat the de facto mental health hospital for the state. We have so many. I think we're sitting at around almost 12,000 offenders that are mental health. And one of the things we understood the problem that we have designated facilities that are mental health facilities for our inmates. We see now that we're going to have to really have a mental health footprint throughout the state to make sure we capture all those individuals. One of the initiatives that I charged is I have everybody, if you're a secretary to a counselor to a maintenance guy to a food service worker, you're going to get mental health training to identify that. That is one of our growing population. We've also created different dormitories and different things for traumatic brain injury, dementia. That's a real big problem with some of our aging inmate population. Post-traumatic stress syndrome with our veterans that we have in our charge. So we're doing a lot of different things system-wide to combat the growing mental health population in our state.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you for bringing your staff here today with you. I have some concerns about the rise in healthcare costs that the department is experiencing. Since 2000, fiscal year 2015, the out of the wire or outside of the facility healthcare cost for medical treatment has almost doubled. And so from 2015 to present, we're looking at $56 million, maybe more, that's being spent on outside of the wire healthcare costs. My recollection was that we contracted with Augusta University to try to reduce those costs. But I'm not seeing those costs being reduced in that agreement. I'm not seeing that being effectuated, and I would like to hear your thoughts on that, but also I'd like to delve into it more with you in subcommittee. Okay.
Well, President, I've got a great question, sir. President, we have a RFP out with a consultant to look at our medical model. We're looking to see, does that model fit what our mission is today? And I think we get those recommendations back in about in a couple of weeks. And then they're going to tell us, okay, this model that you're using now, either it works or it's not working. And if it's not working, then we're going to put it out for bid for the street.
Okay. May I have follow up, Mr. Chairman? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to your information about gangs, you had said 14,806 of your inmates were gang-affiliated members. I'm presuming that those are individuals that are coming into the system are already gang members when they come, or is it that they're converting into gang membership while they're there?
A combination of both. Most of the individuals come in already as gang members, but what we're doing now with the initiatives that we're doing a better job of identifying those individuals and making sure we have the right person identified.
And with the individuals that are gang members, if your percentage is correct, about 71% of those being in overall population being sex offenders or offenders of violent crimes, then that would mean over 10,500 gang members are also violent criminals and or sex offenders. I would imagine that the number's higher in terms of just violent crimes as pertaining to those gangs. So it's a troubling sense in my mind that this organized crime, because that's what it is, it's organized crime, is able to perpetuate these violent crimes against the citizens of the state of Georgia, and then continue the organization behind our prison walls.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I said. We had to, as an agency, we had to look at and recalibrate our thinking of how we manage this population. What's happening now, they're a little bit smarter than we are. So, but with the initiatives that we have in place now, we're trying to give those individuals, we're trying to catch them before the gangs catch them. That's why we're doing the evidence-based facilities. We're doing peer mentoring. We're giving them an option to not participate in that gang activity. Now, I want to make this very clear. We are going to put the tools before these individuals make the change, but we have zero tolerance for gang participation. And I also have a set of parameters to deal with those individuals who do not want to abide by our rules, and we have a course of action for those individuals also.
Representative Hughley. Would you light on?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. On behalf of Representative Bazemore, she wanted to express concern about the mental health issues, and she also wanted to know how do those mental health issues impact others who are incarcerated, and how you all are handling that?
What we do, if you have several classification mental health. You have level 2, level 3, and level 4. Level 2, it don't take us wrong. We might have some level 2 sitting in the audience today because they take the medication, they can function in society very well. Level 3 mental health are those individuals that have to take medication 3 times per day, so they're in a supportive living unit. Anything above a level 3, level 4, they're in a supported living unit by themselves. And everything that's a level 2, if they're taking their medication and compliant, they can function daily in general population. So we make sure we have a strategy to identify those individuals and put them in a position that they're not hurting themselves or hurting other people.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. I would like to commend you and your team for your outstanding responsiveness whenever I call about questions on the inmate or update or whatever is happening. When I was first elected, I didn't realize I had so many people in prison from my district. And then, according to their family members, they were all innocent. So I want to thank you for your charge in housing them. My question is, I have 2 prisons. I have Hayes and I have Walker in my district, and both of them have great leadership. But Walker's a unique prison, and they have a kind of a job placement program for when they leave. They teach them welding and other activities for the industry in my area, and it's proved to be an outstanding program. The technical college partners with them, and it's a great thing. But it's a faith-based pilot project that I think has been outstanding. Do you have any plans for any others in the state?
Yes, we have. Each facility has either have a faith-based dorm or a veterans dorm component. Walker State Prison is just a unique gem in the north part of the country, and it's on a small scale. We've, in pockets, been able to recreate that around the state. But I think our next wave is what I talked about with our evidence-based prison. Our evidence-based prison also have a component of your faith-based, also has a component of your cognitive skills and things like that. So what we're doing now, to change this prison system, it's going to take, it's not one silver bullet, it's a bunch of strategies that we're throwing at this situation and resolving it. And Walker is one component, as well as our evidence-based prisons is another component.
Well, it's definitely working there, and thank you for your leadership in that regard. One more question. You know, you house the largest law enforcement division, I guess, in the state of Georgia. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the number of how many corrections officers you have.
12,000. 7,000 right now.
That's a bunch.
Yes.
So anyway, in the past, keeping them employed has been a problem because our entry-level pay has been kind of low, and I'm hoping one day we can put it where it needs to be. But what is your turnover rate currently? Right now, we're at 40% of turnover rate, but we did have one glimmer of hope this past month. I think we're negative 56 to the good. So it's a big ship, and we're turning it very slowly. And I've been in office going on a year next month, and I projected it'll take about 14 months to start seeing some improvement as far as what we're doing as far as recruiting and retention. We realized that we have a new style of employee that kind of learns and works at a different pace than we used to work at. One of the things that we had to do to kind of combat that, we start opening up cyber cafes in one of our facilities. And that has been a really, really big hit with some of the younger employees because, you know, the first thing they do when they leave work, they're grabbing the cell phone. They're disconnected when away from that cell phone. So we've started doing cyber cafes. We're doing family days at each of our facilities for those individuals, bring the families out and experience where they work at. And those have started yielding some results. Like we said, we had a net gain of 56 last month, which is positive signs for the Georgia Department of Corrections. Well, again, thank you for the outstanding work that you and your team are doing, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
12 people on the waiting list for questions. We're out of time. We're going to take one more question, and if you've got a question, I'm sure the commissioner will be glad to meet with you afterwards and answer your question. So our last question is Representative Knight, David Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you for all you do. Recurring theme here is that the cost of health care keeps going up, you know, for our prison population, especially in regards to mental health, you know, both from I guess a psychological, seeing physicians, and from a prescription drug cost. Is that true?
Repeat your question.
Yeah, the cost keeps going up on mental health, both from the physician perspective and from the prescription drug cost. Is that true?
Yes, and that's one of the things why we say we're putting the RFP out to make sure that the model that we have is conducive for the population that we're dealing with.
Well, in my second question though is that is under managed care, is that correct?
Yes.
And who do we currently contract there with?
Augusta University.
Yeah, but I thought
Centurion for mental health.
Okay. And Centurion, are you aware of who they're affiliated with or a subsidiary of?
MHM? Not bought by Centurion, okay.
I'm sorry?
Centurion, that's the company that runs our mental health programs.
Okay. They're a subsidiary of Centene, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We may be able to help you with some cost issues you're looking at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner, we thank you very much for coming today. A lively discussion. There again, ladies and gentlemen, if you need a question answered, just see the commissioner out in the hall, and he'll be glad to answer it. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Public Defender's Council is next.
No presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, please make your transition quietly. My dad used to lobby for the school bus drivers up here, and he would tell people at the end of the session, if you get down to Ridgeville, stop by and see me. If you get sent to Ridgeville, I'll stop by and see you. That's back when there wasn't one prison. Ms. Rogers, thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate it. The floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm Jiminique Rogers. I've been the interim executive director for the Georgia Public Defender Council since August 2018. I'd like to introduce some of our team members that we have here today with us. I have Terry Rayford, who's our Chief Financial Officer, Cheryl Coronas, who is our External Affairs. We also have our Chief Legal Officer, Amanda Grantham, and our Executive Administrator, Shirley Roberts, in the room with us today. As well, we have our 800 public defenders, investigators, and administrators across the state who are here with us in spirit. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with the committee today and discuss our budget. As background, the Georgia Public Defender Council, GPDC, is responsible for ensuring the constitutional and statutory obligations of the state to provide representation to indigent defendants. This representation is provided in superior courts, which are on the county level, juvenile courts, accountability courts, and the appellate courts throughout the state. Additionally, we're required to provide representation in every case where a death penalty has been noticed by the state, as well as providing representation in any case where the defendant has been found incompetent to stand trial or not guilty by reason of insanity. And as you heard earlier with Chairman, the Department of Corrections statistics, we do have a crisis in our criminal justice population regarding mental health issues. Public defenders ensure the quality of representation, the effective operation of the courts, and the integrity of our criminal justice system. And we do that as an integral part of the judicial system along with the judges, law enforcement, and the community organizations. And we appreciate the opportunity to follow the appellate courts and Department of Corrections because we work within that space. The work that we do is represented in the number of cases that we handle for the state each year. In FY19, we opened approximately a little over 144,000 new cases across the state. This was an increase of 8% over the prior fiscal year and 12% over FY17. As we heard Chief Justice Melton mention, the number of our serious cases have continued to climb. We project this upward trend to continue in light of the growing state population and the increased prosecution of gang and human trafficking offenses, which are generally multi-defendant cases. And we did hear that moments ago from DCOR, how there is a significantly increasing number of gang cases coming into the prisons. Like hospital emergency rooms, the public defender offices, we take every qualified client that comes through the door. We essentially have a duty of care for each of those individual clients. So we carry out that constitutional mandate regardless of what the charges are, which are conditioned only on if the state pursues charges. Since our founding in January 2005, we've handled more than 2 million cases for the state. The vast majority of criminal defendants in Georgia will be represented by a public defender, approximately 90% across the state of every criminal case. Now, our agency carries out that obligations to Georgia citizens through approximately 430 state-funded employees and 350 county-funded employees working in all our offices. The majority of our state employees are statutory in that there is a formula designating their position in our statute. Outside of those providing the administrative functions, we also have a few additional positions in our representational units created due to litigation such as NP, Darden v. Georgia. That case is out of Cordele. We have two additional individuals there. That was a case alleging the failure to provide trial attorneys. And then we have Flournoy v. State, which deals with appellate representation, which we created our Central Appellate Division. We also have almost 300 private attorneys working across the state to provide conflict-free representation in accordance with state ethical rules from the bar. Now, I also want to emphasize our partnership with the counties who subsidize the remaining cost of our statewide system that is not reflected in the state budget. In addition to providing the over 350 supplemental staff, our county partners also provide the facilities for our 33 circuit public defender offices, as well as the attendant utilities, office supplies, and additional IT support. The structure of our budget reflects the priority of our people to carry out the work of statewide representation. Historically, our state budget has been allocated as follows: 77% for employees, that includes salary and benefits, 15% for private contract attorneys that we just talked about that provides conflict-free representation. That percent also includes interpreters and experts that we need for trials and in preparation for trials. 3% of our budget for the state facilities, utilities, operations, and roughly 1% for travel and training. Now, excluding our statutory payments to opt-out circuits, that brings us to about 93% of our budget, which is directly related to representation. GPDC is a historically lean agency, and we've stayed lean since the last recession, where we did not fill many of the positions. We were not able to backfill those, so we have remained lean. In an attempt to meet the reductions in the amended FY20 budget, we eliminated mobile phones and hotspots that were not being heavily utilized. We delayed the hiring of several central office positions. We eliminated all non-representational contracts. We, in fact, reduced the amount of payments for attorneys on contracts, and we reduced our payments to opt-out circuits. We also took one statewide furlough day, which actually amounted to about 1.1 million of our 2.5 million, which was a 4% reduction goal. Looking to meet the budget instructions for FY21, the 6%, we've rolled over the reductions from this year, but we've also already canceled our annual training conference as well as other non-webinar trainings. Because the state bar requires at least 6 in-person trainings for an attorney every year, we're still working with the bar to determine how we can best deliver that training. And just as we heard referenced yesterday, GPDC as a state agency has a limited amount of discretionary funds. As I indicated, 93% of our budget is directly related to representation. However, we will continue to work to improve efficiency and eliminate any unnecessary expenses as we identify them to meet the budget instructions. And with that, I look forward to answering any questions that you have.
We have a few questions. Representative Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rogers, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to your staff. Thank you for them being here today with you. Thank you for your service to the state. Just to be succinct about this, what your department provides is a constitutional defense for those who could not otherwise afford one. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And in providing that constitutional right and ensuring that that constitutional right to a defense is provided, your personnel has to be present in court. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then if you're taking furlough days, then that means that those individuals would not be working and thus would not be in court to provide that defense. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
Are you able to schedule that with judges so that you're not interfering with the justice that individuals are entitled to in our court system?
What we did last year, we worked with our CPDs who reached out to their judges to explain to them the situation and attempt to, as I said, we only had 1 day of furlough, so that was, I think, a little easier to manage. Part of the challenge that we have is that when individuals are arrested and they're detained, we're on the clock to show up many times in court, so it causes a shifting. Beyond the 1 day that we dealt with before, once you get into multiple days of dealing with that, it becomes more of a problem because the defendant's rights have to be afforded in a timely manner. When there's speedy trial demands on the table, then there's other things that come along even when you're actually into the trial stage.
One more question, Mr. Chairman.
Quickly, please.
Yes, sir. To be clear, though, what you're providing is not necessarily this. We have a presumption of innocence, but you're providing a check in the system. You're providing a check in the judicial system to ensure that the state makes its prosecution in a fair and deliberate manner, and that provides the evidence of someone's guilt, if indeed they have it, in order to ensure that someone is prosecuted and justice is actually administered, both in the sense of the defendant getting their constitutional rights protected, but also in light of the victims that are there, that if indeed the defendant is proven to be guilty of the crime, that the evidence supports that finding. Is that fair?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got 9 or 10 questionnaires left and about a minute and a half, so we're going to go as far as we can. You quickly ask your question. Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Director, thank you. You've already spoken to the furlough days, but I'm very concerned about the effect of the hiring freeze. What effect will that have on your agency, and the reductions in the operations budget? Bottom line is, can we assure in this budget that people who are accused and need the services of the Public Defender's Office are going to get those services?
To be honest, I cannot guarantee that. We will work to the best of our ability to identify efficiencies.
Representative Bruce.
I think she may have already answered my questions, but
I'm going to put on my long distance glasses.
No, it's okay. But you know, the furloughs is what I was going to ask about. The furloughs. Are you anticipating any increase in the number of people that have to be furloughed either this year or next year?
Our instruction has been that we are not seeking and we should not furlough.
You should not. Okay. Thank you.
One more question, ladies and gentlemen. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. My question is about your budget and how much of it comes from the state and how much it comes from the counties. In Augusta, for example, we built a brand new building and provide staff. How does this vary across the state, and can you put a percentage on what your budget needs come from the counties?
Let me talk about tangibly what the counties provide, because the county partnership is very significant for us. As I said, the counties provide the facilities and the equipment, the IT hookup for all of our circuit offices. So that's all county funds. It's not reflected in any budget. We don't have an actual cost on that, but we know that that is significant. In addition, the counties supplement the offices as they're able to across the state with additional attorneys, investigators, and admin, because the pace and the volume of cases in any circuit is not necessarily reflected in what our statutory formula are. So we give the minimum number of state attorneys, investigators, and admin in any circuit. So across the state, it ranges. It may range from, in Cordele, and not to pick on Cordele, but we've worked with them significantly. It may range to about 10 to 25%. In other circuits, it may range up to 80-some% of what the budget of that circuit is. Our budget for each circuit is flat, so it ranges across the state, but the county partnership is significant, and their contribution is significant.
Ms. Rogers, we appreciate very much you coming today. That's an impressive presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be the Department of Community Supervision, Commissioner Michael Nail. Commissioner, come on up.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman England and Chairman Hill, and thank you for the opportunity. Members of the committee, I've never heard a complaint about a short presentation, so I will work to indulge you there. Before I go into the budget, just a little bit of an overview of DCS and what we're up against. We're responsible for supervising just over 230,000 convicted felons that are on parole or probation in the state of Georgia. We lead the nation in the number of individuals under community supervision and actually have the highest caseloads of individuals in the entire nation. We have a complement of 1,950 staff, approximately 1,500 are sworn. But really what I want to share is how blessed we are to have committed, personal, and competent staff. The average age of an adult offender under our supervision is 34 years old. And here's the challenges our officers are up against day in and day out. For 34 years, this individual has had many opportunities at many systems within the system itself, whether it be home, whether it be community, whether it be schools, whatever the case. Somewhere along the line, They have failed, and perhaps systems have failed. And then here comes an individual laid at our doorstep with the charge to fix them. Fix them. What I'm proud of, more times than not, despite having the highest number under supervision, despite having the highest caseloads, our officers and our staff do just that more times than not. I never want to miss an opportunity to praise their good work. Many of you have gone on ride-alongs. I think you would attest to the fact that they are a professional, competent group that works to keep Georgia safe. For the budget reductions in amended fiscal year 2020, where our cut is $7.4 million. Fiscal year 2021, it is $10.4 million. 3 ways that we have addressed this: through operational efficiencies, strategic workforce management, and evidence-based decision making. I have a breakdown of each one of those areas. But again, the totals are $7.4 million for amended fiscal year and $10.4 million for the fiscal year. What I want to spend time on is sharing with you how we plan to do that. Under operational efficiencies, and many of these, in fact, all of these have already been implemented, we want to reduce office supplies and non-essential travel. Makes sense in times like this, that you pay a little closer attention to those issues. We want to reduce physical footprint by emphasizing a distributed workforce model by capitalizing on technology. Some have heard the word virtual office. Some have heard closing offices. The bottom line is we will continue to have an operational footprint in every judicial circuit across this state. Services will continue to be delivered. The manner in which they once were, by having a physical location in some areas, may change, but we're able to make that change by leveraging technology. Of course, renegotiating contracts where it is feasible, taking a hard look at those. The second is strategic workforce management. In the old days, I should say, prior to these budget cuts, if a circuit lost a position, they got a position. That's not the most effective way to do business. Now we do workforce analysis studies. If a circuit loses a position, they go to a centralized personnel pool, and that position then goes to the circuit that has the greatest need, that has been demonstrated through metrics and data. We shift from a case count to a time-based supervision model. Research tells us the minimum amount of time to be successful with individuals under your supervision, the minimal is 10 minutes. In reality, it is 20 to 30 minutes. Time is the driver of everything we do. It's not about contacts, it's what you are doing when you're making that contact. So we've moved from a case count model to a time-based model to help us be more effective and efficient. Third, on the evidence-based decision-making, we have eliminated non-statutory functions. We have eliminated functions that it is not within our purview or scope. Many of you may recognize it as mission creep, but if somebody else can do it and they have the statutory authority to do it, they can do it. We will no longer be providing those services. Consolidating internal and external duplicative functions. Naturally, when you look at services provided externally, you also look at services providing internally and see where we are duplicating and eliminating those. I promised you it would be brief. We have our website, just Department of Community Supervision, where our annual report is also listed. In addition to that, if you have a ride-along opportunity that you would go and partner with a community supervision officer in your community, we would be more than welcome to have you do that. Subject to any further questions, sir, that concludes my report.
Representative Stovall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I have a question about the Station of Hope. I know at one point those programs were operating. I know in Clayton County we had it, but then I didn't hear anything else about it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. Those were with the Georgia Prison Reentry Initiative. We had a validated study that was done by Applied Research Services. And the unfortunate part of that, when it comes down to actually reducing recidivism, there was not a direct correlation with the Stations of Hope or faith-based delivery of services by the state. We still have them. We have strengthened that model because, quite honestly, I think there was an effort to increase the number of Stations of Hope without actually reviewing the quality of services being provided. With that being said, we recognize we cannot do this alone. It takes us working with community providers. It takes us working with the citizens. It takes us working with the faith-based community. But at the end of the day, it showed no direct correlation in the reduction of recidivism. That doesn't mean it's not important and doesn't make a difference.
I know one of the, may I have a follow-up, Mr. Chairman? I know one of the issues that we ran into was resources being able to be provided. So I know when you talk about the direct correlation, but if you don't have the resources or access to additional funds to be able to help facilitate, you know, the programs that were put in place, was a great, you know, program. And I was sad to see that it, you know, was not actually functioning because we had some faith-based that had signed up and were really interested, but they ran into that problem of resources.
Well, and I understand, but I would remind you that is not a state-funded program to begin with. That is strictly volunteer. We do have coordinated efforts through volunteers, but there's not any state money that goes towards that.
Had you had any plans of adding that into the budget as a suggestion?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, it's always good to see you.
Likewise, sir.
Proud of the work that you're doing. We go way back.
We do.
Back in the 90s and the 80s.
Let's stop there.
I'll stop there then. Just want to ask one question on supervision. You mentioned going from a case count model to a time-based model.
Yes,
how
sir.
efficient has that been?
It's been extremely efficient, Representative Jackson, to the point that caseloads now, as a result of that, are actually lower than they have ever been. And what we realized, not everybody needs our services. Not everybody needs our full array of services. That 20% that are high risk and high need, that needs to be our priority. And it's all about time. For instance, when we looked down in Statesboro and we looked at contacts and time, our officers were already in the negative before the day even started. Why? A lot of windshield time in rural areas. So we recognize that time is absolutely critical. You can, in an hour, see maybe 20 individuals under supervision in Atlanta. When you go to rural Georgia, that hour, you may only see one, and that's if they're home. So again, going to the virtual model based on time instead of contacts has increased productivity. All of our numbers are moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Commissioner. Oh, thank y'all. I know y'all have had a chore ahead of you since we created the department a few years ago by combining pardon and paroles. And I want to compliment all of y'all and your people, the boots on the ground, for the great job they do, given what they have to deal with.
Yes, sir.
But, you know, I've listened. You and I have talked a little bit about this a while back when I heard the plans about closing offices and such as that. And I'm still trying to wrap my hands around that, knowing basically what these officers have to encounter of dealing with them. One is having a facility that they can come to do their drug testing and all such as that, and they can put eyes on them under your shop. But in this program, they're going to have to be going to find those people on their turf.
Yes, sir.
And the thing that I really got a concern about is, have y'all analyzed what kind of increased risk that could be to the officers? Because first and foremost, that's one of the concerns I have.
Absolutely, and if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, it's that very issue, making sure our officers start and return home safely. And I will tell you, first of all, community supervision is done in the community. Back in the mid-90s, it was probably erroneously tagged as fortress probation, where you come to us Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. That's not the world we live in today. When we talk about safety for our officers, we just about 4 months ago implemented personal emergency devices where if they need help, it's one press of the button, they're going to have the cavalry coming their way. That's the first time a system like that has ever been implemented for our field staff. We arm them, we train them, but more importantly, we teach them how to communicate with individuals. I've heard it said long ago, your mouth can get you in a lot of trouble, and your mouth can get you out of a lot of trouble. Keep in mind that that has been taking place since the consolidation of those two entities for community supervision. Our work is in the field. We occupy an office approximately 15 to 20% of the time, but we're paying for it 100%. So to the large part, officers aren't in the office anyway. Main thing for the office is not supervision, it's simply the processing of cases coming from court. We did it with parole, shut down every one of our brick and mortar offices and now going to what we call click and mortar. But what we found is productivity increased, leave utilization went down, staff morale went up.
Further question, and I certainly hope that you're right on this. Is there going to be an extra expense? Because as I understand it, y'all are totally, the program is to totally get rid of all brick and mortar offices. Is that correct?
No, sir, that's not correct. There were two things that is driving the office closures that we have put up for budget. One, they either are tenant at will, or two, their lease is coming for expiration at the end of the fiscal year. We recognize you're not going to be able to close all offices. Number one, to get out of a lease is going to be more costly. We have 10 state-owned offices. What we're doing is simply shrinking the footprint. We are not planning to close every office. And again, I want to hesitate a little bit on using the word close because it insinuates we're moving operations out of that particular county or city or judicial circuit, and that's just not the case. The only difference is there is not a physical structure there. We have our vehicle assignments. When the agency was created, we actually talked about assigning one vehicle to one officer. We went back and cut that request in half because that was not the most effective or efficient utilization of vehicles. We are now equipped where we have one vehicle per 2 officers.
And I guess my question, if by closing, and I can only talk about the Northern Judicial
Sure.
Circuit.
Yes, sir.
5 counties. We have an office that's central in that office. That'll be closed. That's a leased office. That'll be closed. I'm trying to remember how many we've got. I think we've got 18 or 19 officers that work in that area. How will they be making up? Where will they report to? If you have half the number of cars for the officers, so
right.
Where will they report and switch over and such as that?
Are you talking about the officers?
Yes.
That's the other thing when you look at fuel savings. Think about this. You had an officer living on one side of the county. They would drive into the office to get that state vehicle to sometimes go right back from where they came. Now they park them at a governmental office or a secured location. They work the schedule out amongst officers. And keep in mind that with a virtual office model, all of our supervision is geographically based. We don't have folks crisscrossing in the county. We're assigned by geography for that very reason, where we're saving fuel, we're saving wear and tear on vehicles, and we're increasing capacity to supervise offenders in the field.
But there won't be, in our case, there won't be any office for those officers. They'll have to go to Athens or somewhere.
If they have a need to go to an office. And Representative Powell, I'll share with you on the drug testing, that was a challenge we ran into. We are now moving towards a buccal swab instead of a urine collection. It makes it safer, it's quicker, and it's more focused on the specific drug testing that we're targeting for that individual under supervision.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate the job your folks do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, thank you for being here this morning.
Yes, sir.
I am concerned about the budget cuts relative to the Georgia Prison Reentry Initiative program. Could you elaborate on the cuts you're making, why you're making them, and what effect you think they're going to have on recidivism?
I will. Thank you, sir. Prison Reentry Initiative started with 17 sites. They are what we call high-release sites, individuals coming out of prison to those communities. Last year, we asked to expand 10 of those sites that were lower volume, all relatively equal in the size of releases. We were only funded for 5. So we were automatically put in a way of saying, okay, who gets what where? We also understood that everywhere, going back to the core mission, a lot of times our housing coordinators were actually looking for housing capacity. Last time I checked, that was not the statutory responsibility of Department of Community Supervision to go look for creating housing. So the housing coordinator is one position that we found in those more rural areas for sustainable and startup housing that we could cut from. I'd already referenced the valuation, the in-reach in those areas, as well as the faith providers in that area showed no substantial positive impact on reducing recidivism. So one would ask, why would we keep putting money towards it? But at the end of the day, there were 33 positions that were slated for those 10 sites that we have eliminated from the reentry program. And in fact, those individuals have had the opportunity to go into caseload carrying jobs, again, where we can keep the caseloads down and work at a productive rate.
Representative Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question around the idea of probation. Generally, how long, when someone gets out, are they on probation? And then is there a point where you think there's diminishing returns for keeping them on probation beyond that point?
Thank you, and I will be more than happy to pay for your lunch for asking that question. Not only do we have the highest cases under supervision, not only do we have the highest caseloads in the nation, we also have the longest periods of supervision in the nation. On average, an individual sentenced to straight probation is going to serve 6 years on probation. If they have had a prison term associated with it, they're going to serve an average of 8 years under supervision. Research shows you begin to get diminished returns at 18 to 24 months. If you haven't made them or worked with them to become successful by that time, every day after that, it diminishes the return. There's two reasons people won't change behavior. They don't want to, or they don't know how. And it's our role and responsibility to facilitate that change in that up to 18 to 24 months. Beyond that, I don't want to ever say it won't happen, but your reinvestment is being minimized greatly.
And just, Mr. Chairman, just as a follow-up, so is there a legislative answer to what you just said? Is there something, if you had the magic wand, that you could say, hey, if you guys did this, it would help us, blah, blah, blah?
I would go to a sentencing model that one size fits one and not one size fits all.
Thanks.
Representative Al Williams. Are you 6 years into yours?
Yeah, I've got about 4 months left, and I can tell you why. Thank you for being here, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
As a follow-up to the question that the chairman asked you, just in your estimate, you say 2 years, you're in or you're out. If you could get it down to 2 to 3 years, how much would that affect your nation-leading caseload now?
Well, it would cut it down by about 2/3. If you look at the average being 6 years and you cut it down to 2 years. Now, I will say this, there's been great work with criminal justice reform. This last round, we were able, when they cut off at 3 years, we were able to see a decrease in just at 22,000 cases like that. With the 3 years and the behavioral incentive date that is allowed by law, we don't know what the impact is going to be because since its passage, 3 years' time has not lapsed. So it's a wait and see approach on that. But again, it's all about time. And anything we can do to decrease the length of time, then that's going to give us resources to supervise those individuals that we need to be working with.
Thank you. And at the end, in subcommittee, maybe I'd like to speak more about reentry.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With greater emphasis coming on mental health and treatment and services, what is being done in those regions where there are such limited mental health facilities or providers?
Well, I'll acknowledge first and foremost, we don't have enough resources in the mental health area. We know that population continues to expand, not just in the prison system, but in community supervision. I think we all understand that. The approach we have taken is we have specialized caseloads where officers are specifically trained in mental health. They have a reduced caseload of 40 mental health offenders under their supervision because we know that this group is the most time intensive. We work closely with our community service boards to provide those resources. Where there is a gap, we work with behavioral health in trying to shore that gap up. The system has made significant improvement from 10 years ago, but we're nowhere close to being where we need to go, and it's simply because of capacity. When you look at rural areas, for instance, the mental health providers, there may not be a large number there. Why? They have trouble to even retain staff. That's not just on the state side, that's even on the private mental health providers as well. So it is a challenge. I don't have one solution for it other than we continue to work towards it, but I believe the specialized officers with mental health caseloads, the special training, crisis intervention, that's the way we're dealing with it now.
And if I could follow up, Mr. Chairman, what percentage of cases have a component of requiring counseling or treatment, mental health treatment?
We're looking at diagnosis. If I were, Scott, can you help me on that? Because I know it's roughly at just over 20% that have mental health issues. Now, when you get into the severity of it, whether it's persistent and severe, I would have to do the breakdown on that population, but they are assigned to a mental health caseload.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Well, Commissioner, it appears you have satisfied the desire to know about community supervision.
Thank you,
there
sir.
are no further questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
the
Thank you for
opportunity.
being with us.
Yes, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, next up we have Commissioner Oliver with the Department of Juvenile Justice. Is Commissioner Oliver in the house? Okay. Good morning, sir. Hope you're doing well.
Good morning. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good deal. Glad to have you with us this morning. And the podium is yours when you're ready to start.
All right. Thank you, Chairman and committee members. I'm going to try to run through our budget process here really quick for you on our amended 2020 budget and our FY 2021. First off, I'd just like to say, you know, as upon being appointed to this this role right here in July, I've been greeted with phenomenal staff, and a couple of them are here with me today, and I just think that's a testament of the hard work that the men and women at the Department of Juvenile Justice do every day for the mission for our kids and to provide positive outcomes. It's a really big benefit that we have. As we started our 2020 budget, we started with $357,384,470, and we had to come to a 4% reduction of about $14.6 million. And I'm just going to run down on line items. It should be on your page on the governor's recommendation on page 237 on the community services. Line item number 1 to reflect the adjustment to agency premiums for the Department of Administrative Services and Administered Self-Insurance Programs. You're going to see that reduction across all programs, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Line item number 2 is reduce the funds by freezing non-security positions that were vacant since November 1, 2018, and that's a total of 52 positions for cost savings about $2.1 million. And we're going to reduce our funds by reducing our travel and eliminating supplemental training. That's our professional development conferences. We're going to leverage lunch and learns and some other alternative ways to provide those types of training. So we're not going to eliminate them completely, but we're still going to provide that training, but coming with innovative ways, utilizing technology and other methods to provide training instead of having 4 and 5 day conferences. Line item number 4 in the community service is to reduce the funds by eliminating landlines and telephone lines for employees who have cellular phones. That's going to be a cost savings in the community service project at about $22,000, and we're doing that again across all of our programs within Department of Juvenile Justice. Skipping down to the administration, really focused on line item number 2 is to reduce funds by freezing non-security positions that were vacant since November 1st, 2018, that's approximately 4 positions for a savings of $215,621. And again, we're going to, on line item number 3, eliminate or reduce our funding for our PDC trainings, our professional development conference trainings. We're doing a lot of training throughout the day, throughout the normal business hours, on lunch and learns, and coming up with innovative ways using technology to affect that, that mission. And also we're reducing our landlines and cellular phones for employees who have cellular phones. Our secure commitment, our YDCs, which are, we have 7 of those, which are long-term facilities within DJJ. The biggest thing on line item number 2 is freezing security and non-security positions that were vacant since November the 1st, 2018. That's a total of 187 positions for a cost savings, a reduction of $7.8 million. And then we're reducing the travel and again the supplemental insurance. I just want to just emphasize on that's not going to lag again. We're very focused on our training, and that's not going to lag. We're coming with innovative ways to make sure that we're accommodating our employees that way. And reduce funds for delayed opening for our career technology and agricultural educational program that was delayed opening October 1st, 2019. That was a cost savings of $96,000. And again, across the program, reducing landlines for employees who have cellular devices. In our secure detention, which is our short-term facilities, detention centers, we have 19 of those across the state. Line item number 2 is reduce the funds by freezing security and non-security positions that were vacant since November the 1st, 2018. Those were 99 positions for a cost savings of $4.2 million. And moving into the 2021 budget changes, to get to the 6% reduction, we had to reduce the budget and found a cost savings of about $19 million. And in the community service programs, we reduced the funds, line item number 1, reduce the funds to reflect the adjustment in employer shared of teachers' retirement systems for 21.14% to 16.6%. And you're going to see that across the board as well in the rest of the programs in the YDCs and our YDC program and in the community where we're at. Reduce the funds for the Georgia Technology Authority administrative fee for GETS contract management. That's $91,838 savings. And increase funds to provide a $1,000 pay raise for full-time employees with current salaries of $40,000 or less. And that's going to be huge, as you all know, as our recruitment and retention as it relates to DJJ employees. Our low-level staff that get paid less than $40,000 is going to be critical to support that, to ensure that they get a incentive to stay with us. And as we continue to try to change the culture there at DJJ, that's going to be a good boost in morale for the employees across the board. And you're going to see that translate through the rest of the programs as well. Increased funds to utilize the operations of our CSEC facility in Paulding County for our sexual exploitated children, and that's a $100,000 increase into the budget to operate and maintain that facility. Line item number 6, reduce funds by eliminating landlines and telephone lines with employees who have cellular devices, $88,468. Reduce funds by traveling and eliminating supplemental training conferences, that's $150,000 savings. And adjust funds to state employees scheduled to receive the increase for certified personnel by $2,000 effective July 1. That was in the governor's recommendation to provide raises for teachers, which is critical. You know, as DJJ, we're the 181st school district within the state of Georgia, and it's critical to maintain the level, the teachers there to provide positive outcomes for our kids. Department of Juvenile Justice Department of Administration pretty much translates the same as what I talked about as far in the community. I'll draw your attention to line item number 6 to reduce funds by eliminating a non-security position that was vacant since July 1 of 2018, and that's one position, which is $84,642 in savings there. Our secure commitment long-term facilities, our YDC. Again, we talked about the teachers' retirement reduction and the GETs, and then the pay raises for our full-time employees. So we jump over to line item number 4, which is to reduce the funds to reflect the closure of our Sumter Youth Development Campus, resulting in population decrease due to criminal justice reform. We saw a population decrease in that facility as a result of criminal justice reform, and also our Sumter YDC, the decision that goes into that, our Sumter or YDC is our second largest costly facility to run in that program. And it has some other structural issues and maintenance issues, security issues, and that's what went into our decision to close that facility as part of the 6% reduction. And all the employees that are currently there, we have vacancies within their surrounding jurisdictions to be able to absorb those employees, so no one's going to be affected by that cut. We've already mapped out a plan to have the employees go to other facilities within that geographical area to ensure that they still have a job within DJJ, so it's going to have minimal impact on staffing across the state. Number 5, we reduced the funds by eliminating one deputy commissioner position. That's $184,811, and that was due to the retirement of one of our deputy commissioners upon me first getting there. And we did some reorganization on that side. We put the RYDCs and the YDCs under one umbrella to have a little bit more of a span of control on how movement of the youth and personnel within that agency. So we're going to eliminate that deputy commissioner position within the budget that was vacant. Also reduce funds by eliminating one program coordinator. Again, that was part of the reorg. This position was vacant as well. So that all the positions that we eliminated have no one's been in them. So that program coordinator position is vacant, and we're going to eliminate that. Of course, goes into the cell phones and landlines, for eliminating landlines for people who have cell phones, and reducing the travel for our conferences. Item number 9, to reduce funds for the maintenance workers at the 7 facilities. Currently, we have 19 filled positions there and 4 vacant positions. The thought process behind that, we have duplication of services, where we have our maintenance workers that are DJJ staff, and then we also contract for maintenance workers who actually they're at the same location. And so we're putting the thought process behind that is some of our maintenance workers they usually go to work for a CGL, which is our contractor for maintenance agreements, and so they usually be able to pay more. So the thought process behind that is that typically once they get on, we kind of use it as a temp service, so to speak. They come on with us, CGL sees they have a skill set that's needed, and then they get hired with CGL. And so the thought process behind that is that those employees, the 19 that's filled in that program, will be picked up by CGL, and you're going to see that as well in the RYDCs as we get down in there. And typically that's what happens with the maintenance workers that we have on staff. Reduce the funding by eliminating security and non-security positions that were vacant since July 1, 2018. That's a total of 115 positions. Again, through criminal justice reform, we kind of see a decrease in our population, so it's not going to affect our operations as it stands right now. And increase funds to adjust state-based salaries for our teachers by 2,000. You're going to see that again in the RYDC down on the next line. Going down to our RYDCs, which again we have 19 of those. We talked about the teacher assignment reduction. Just want to jump down to line item number 4, which is reduced funds for facility maintenance workers. Again, we have 14 filled, 5 vacant. They should all be picked up within CGL. If not, both in the RYDC and YDC, we have positions within DJJ that they can go into or they can apply for, so they can still have employment with DJJ if they so choose to do so. Number 5, reduce funds by eliminating security and non-security positions that were vacant since July 1, 2018. It's a total of 50 positions, which is a savings of $2.1 million. And reducing the elimination of landlines for those employees who have telephones, cell phones, and of course our training. And just before I open it up to take questions, I know I went through it pretty quickly, but you know, like I told you before, coming in July, I think it kind of, in the governor's recommendation to come up with the 4% and the 6%, it's like what they've been telling me, it's like drinking water from a fire hose, and that's definitely how it's been. But it actually gave me a good opportunity to dive in and look at the budget as a whole and as an agency as a whole to see where we can come up with these cost savings and where we had duplication of service and how we can leverage technology to better serve our youth and employees in our care. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. I can entertain any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, I got a few questions. Representative Oliver.
Good morning.
What's the total number of positions you're eliminating?
Total number of positions, Stephen on the total number. Budget person. Hang on 1 second. Have a budget. 152. 152.
And how many of those 152 had you been actively trying to recruit and hire, but were simply unable to hire over the last 12 months?
So those positions, all the positions have been vacant since either July of 2018 or November of 2018, and so those positions usually stay open if we have a need, but it hasn't impacted any services that we provide on a day-to-day basis for our staff.
Does that mean you have not been actively trying to fill those positions for the last year plus?
Yes, we have. We have been actively trying to fill them.
You have not?
We have been, yes.
What's the population reduction in the since November 18?
Currently, our population in our YDCs, I can give you the population what we have right now. It's 347. In our long-term facilities out of 746 beds that we have, and our RYDC population is 844 out of the 1,204 beds that we have. And
that's been reduced by 10% or 20% since November 18?
Yes, easily. Since criminal justice reform, we've seen a steady decline on our population of kids in custody, and more so in our community. So currently, we have about 1,200 that we service inside secure confinement and about 10,000 in the community.
Based on not being able to hire, although you've been actively trying, in criminal justice reform, how many empty beds do you have across the state now?
Empty beds, we have total beds available in our YDC. We have 320 beds, and in our YDC program, 399 available.
Representative Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, from what I understand, you have 399 beds and you have 400 youths that y'all are giving services to in the YDC statewide. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our statewide population is 347 currently.
347.
Correct.
Okay. And is that population remain constant, declining, increasing? What are the trends?
Since over the last 12 months when I looked at it, it's kind of been declining a little bit. It kind of hang around a 300, 350 mark. We haven't reached over that in the last 12 months.
Gotcha. Well, my concern is about the facility in Sumter County. Recently, we did a ribbon cutting for improvements to that facility less than 3 months ago. And then here I see that y'all have plans to close that facility. How many beds are located in that facility?
We have a total of, hang on, let me get to it. Here it is. The beds for Sumter County, we can house up to 150.
150 beds, up to 150 beds.
Yes.
It appears that if we close that facility, we lose 150 beds out of the 400 that you have available. What are you going to do with the 100 juveniles that you need to serve with the difference?
Well, currently we have 59 youth that are housed in Sumter County, which we can absorb in, and the rest of the 6 are YDCs throughout the state.
Okay. Well, I'd like to talk to you further about that. I don't want to take up the committee's time, but if you take 150 from 400, that leaves 250. And if we've got 347, where are the other 40, where are the other?
That's our capacity, that's our functional capacity, what we're operating on. We've never, in the last couple of years, never had over 100, more than 80 kids down at Sumter.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 questions. One, with respect to the Sumter facility, there are other regional facilities that are close by in order to serve the population of the 59 youths that you have there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then I want to thank you for stating in your budget report that you're looking at vacancies that, frankly, will be at the end of this fiscal year, the beginning of the next fiscal year, the 2021 year. You're looking at 2-year vacancies that have existed, while you've actively sought to fill those vacancies over those last 2 years, and yet those have not found anyone to occupy those positions, and as a result, you're recommending that those be cut, amounting to almost $5 million in savings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, I too was concerned about the number of positions that you were reducing, particularly the security positions. What impact is that going to have on your operations with this number that you're reducing by?
Just like the chairman stated, I think those positions have been vacant for a little over 2 years now. And what we've seen as a result of our decline in population with our criminal justice reform, we'll be able to manage the number of kids that we have inside of our facilities with that cut. Now, keep in mind, that's not cutting all of our vacant positions. That's just eliminating the positions that were vacant for the last 2 years. So we still have to get our staffing numbers up to the levels where they need to be in certain facilities. But those are the positions that have been vacant for 2 years that no one has been in whatsoever.
May I ask another question, Mr. Chairman? In light of the fact that we are about to embark upon this gang task force kind of thing, I would assume that some of those are going to be juvenile. So have you accounted for what you anticipate in terms of the increased numbers as a result of that?
We have. In our long-term facilities, our bed utilization rates are just under 50%, and on our detention centers, we're running about our bed utilization rate where we have people inside of beds about 65%. And so depending on how aggressive that task force is and if those kids are going to actually be coming to us, we do have the capacity initially right now to service that population.
Thank you.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, yes. I'm from the Augusta area, and we've had some issues over the years there at YDC and RYDC. And these cuts, what do you think the impact of these cuts are going to bring to a facility like we have there in Augusta?
Again, I think the cuts as it relates to the security staff, they haven't been there for the past 2 years. I can tell you this, looking at Augusta, I was just down there a couple of weeks ago, and they're doing a phenomenal job down there. The staff's doing a phenomenal job down there to manage that population. One of the Augusta, and our Augusta YDC is one of our largest mental health facilities that we operate, and they do a phenomenal job of managing that. Again, the staffing cuts, we still have vacant positions throughout the state within those facilities. So the cuts that we spoke about inside the budget were just vacant positions that no one has been in. So we've just to kind of clarify that a little bit, we've been filling positions as they come in, but the ones that we've cut are just we just didn't have a need for them.
Okay. Follow up.
Sure.
On the educational piece, you know, as these kids, I mean, there's a lot going through my head here. What are we doing to sustain the educational piece of training these kids or giving them some a support system to re-enter, because this pipeline to prison is real.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that's one of my main focuses going into this this year is our reentry program. Just down in Savannah, not too long ago, we had a LEAP graduation where we partnered with certain businesses and organizations down there to provide training and logistical training for kids going out of the facility into the reentry and in the community, and to provide jobs. I think we graduated 8 to 10 youth down there, and all of them were afforded an opportunity to have jobs. I think 8 of them got employed out of that. A couple of weeks ago, we had a partnership with Home Depot to provide soft skills and resume building and training through Home Depot Corporation for our reentry programs. And we had a graduation of young men, and then a graduation here recently of young women, both inside the facilities and inside the community, that took advantage of that program and went through that training as well. So we're trying to definitely there's room for improvement there on the reentry side, and we're going to ramp that up as we go into 2020 this year. But we do have phenomenal programs that we partner with. But I do agree we need to kind of find that connection to provide external services for them once they leave our care.
Hey, Commissioner, looks like that you've exhausted the questions. We appreciate your attendance today and your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is going to be the Department of Defense, General Carden.
Good morning, Senator Hill, Representative England, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to brief you today on the Georgia Department of Defense budget for the remainder of 2020 and the budget for 2021. Our overall budget before we started working on the 4% and 6% cuts was about $12.7 million. Thanks to a great financial management team, we found a way to absorb those reductions without losing any employees or furloughing any employees. For the 2020 budget, we were able to cut $510,445 from our budget, meeting the 4% reduction target. We did this by converting one state position to a 100% federally funded position, and it was a cost savings of $36,370. We took additional cuts of $474,075 from our youth education services. Thankfully, our Youth Challenge Academy campus at Fort Gordon is undergoing a much-needed upgrade. As such, we needed to reduce student capacity during construction. So by matching our graduation target with our capacity, it allowed us to take a cut of $218,359 for the campus at Fort Gordon. In addition, we reduced our graduation target at Milledgeville at that Youth Challenge campus to match our projected enrollment for that campus. This enabled us to cut an additional $255,716 from the Milledgeville campus. So the total for the 2020 cuts, again, was just over $510,000. Moving on to the 2021 budget, again, starting from the top line of $12.7 million, we were able to cut $10,275 from our overall administrative cost. And again, by adding back in the position that we converted from state to 100% federal, we harvested that $36,370. In addition, we cut from military readiness $19,471 from our operating expense account. Just as with the 2020 cuts, we matched our capacity and projected enrollment at the Fort Gordon campus, where we were able to cut $332,340 from that budget. And then from the Milledgeville campus, we were able to cut $377,486. The total cuts for 2021 came to $765,667. So we started at a top line of $12.7 million, and we came in with a 6% for the 2021 at just under $12.1 million. I believe we did a very responsible job in meeting our budget targets while minimizing the impact on our most important asset, and that's obviously our people. I'd like to say that we're very thankful to Governor Kemp and his staff for supporting our bond issue that totaled $8 million, $6 million of which will go to renovate armories, and $2 million will go to our overall facility upkeep and maintenance. Thank you all for all you have and continue to do to support your National Guard. Sir, that concludes my briefing, subject to any questions.
General Cardin. Representative Williams from Fort Stewart.
Thank you, sir. The Rock of the Marne.
Rock of the Marne, sir.
Yes, sir. Good to have you here, General, as always. And Chairman Welch certainly expresses his regrets he had to leave for another schedule. But both of us have expressed some concerns, and we know, you know, my big thing is Youth Challenge.
Yes, sir.
And we have some concerns about the recent cuts. You've explained them real well. We just want to make sure that when we get things in place, because the return on investment is so huge in that program and the need is greater than ever.
Yes, sir.
So we appreciate what you have done with Youth Challenge, and as soon as we get that mold condition taken care of, a couple of other things between Milledgeville and Augusta, and if you have any wipe-up funds right there at Fort Stewart, we'll take them then.
Yes, sir, and we're very thankful for the support of our Youth Challenge program. As you know, it costs about $15,000 to put a kid through the Youth Challenge program to give that young man or woman a second chance, and of that, the state spends about $3,750. And I always like briefing behind DJJ because it costs about $90,000 a year to keep a young man or woman in one of those facilities as compared to $3,750. So we think, we may be a little bit biased, but we think we're pretty good return on investment in the Department of Defense running those Youth Challenges academies. And we're also going to work very hard to stretch every dollar that we can to make sure that you're getting the best return on investment possible, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to comment how much I appreciate the Youth Challenge Academy in Milledgeville.
Yes, sir.
I've toured it many times, been to many of the graduations, and I've seen the young people as they come in, and I've seen them as they graduate, and you've certainly made an impact, and I thank you for that dedication.
Yes, sir. The local support there, I can't say enough about what you and the community do to support that campus. Overall, our Youth Challenge academies, we graduated just over 940 in 2019, and we'd love to graduate more this year as well. So very thankful for that, sir.
Well, General, you've satisfied all the questions. I'm sorry, I got one more. Okay. Representative Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, thank you for what you do in this program. Couple of questions and maybe a statement, but It seems coincidental that one of the cuts is regarding, or both of them are capacity or projected graduate, levels for the upcoming year.
Yes, sir.
What happens in the case of the one where we have remodeling or you're doing upgrades at a facility? What happens next year or the year after when that capacity rises, up? So that would be the first question.
Yes, sir. I think obviously that will enable us to make a business case back to the governor and the staff and obviously the legislature to articulate that our capacity is back based on the renovations, and we feel like we can accommodate more kids, and then obviously a financial decision will be made at that point. We're not there right now. We believe this renovation will stretch through this period of directed budget cuts, so the impact is negligible now. But I can't testify that they'll be negligible into the foreseeable future. Obviously, that situation will change when those beds come back online.
And I follow up, Mr. Chairman, I assume that that's in regards to the Augusta facility.
Yes, sir.
So as we go into the Milledgeville facility, again, numbers are down, but is that because we've got less youth that need or are enrolling, or is that because we got budget cuts and this is all we can do?
Well, I think it's certainly not because we don't have the capacity. We've never been able to fill the capacity at the Milledgeville campus. We have a capacity to take up to about 150 there, and we've been taking somewhere between 100 and 120 with that campus. But it is our newest campus. We market the program. We work with school superintendents. In fact, I'm speaking in an educational leadership forum over in Athens this weekend. So we do everything we can do to make sure that a young man or woman in the state of Georgia that wants a second chance, that wants to be in that program, we want to provide that opportunity to that young man or woman, sir.
And while I dare not speak for everyone, but I believe the sentiment is that we agree with you, and we agree that this is a great program that is cost effective up front, that will allow some of these youth, like you said, to have a second chance and lead very productive, fulfilling lives. So we do support you. We just want to make sure that we're not undercutting ourselves in the long term.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you very much for your support.
Representative Bruce.
Hi there.
Hello, sir.
What is the current status on the facility over in Adamsville? Are you guys going to, especially where it backs up into that community, because we had some issues over there with some people selling drugs, really.
Right.
On the back side of your property. I know you didn't know they were over there selling drugs, but we had to send the police over there several times.
Yes, sir.
What is the current status on that property and on the back side where it butts up to the community?
Yes, sir. Well, I'm glad you asked that question. We did get a demolition project approved by the federal government last year, and so we believe once we're able to demolish some of the old facility, that was the Lorenzo Benz facility that you're referring to over there. Once we get that demolished, then essentially it will not provide as much of a haven to those people to come in and do things we're not proud of in that facility. So those federal demolition dollars, I think, are going to go a long way in helping us clean that place up a little bit.
Well, I believe you have now finished all the questions. So,
yes, sir.
General, we thank you very much. Appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate you bringing Joe with you there, too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's an honor to be here. Thank you all for what you do for us every day.
Okay. Next speaker is going to be Colonel McDonough with Vic Reynolds with the GBI.
Do you control the slides, sir? Okay.
Director, we're glad to have you this morning. The floor is yours.
Folks, thank you so much. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Vic Reynolds. I'm the director of the GBI. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you. I think last time I had a chance to speak to any of you folks was toward the end of the session last year. I was a brand new director. I told you that I was trying to still find all the restrooms at the GBI. I'm happy to report to you I've done that today. And we're ready to roll. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I do want to take a moment to thank both these bodies for all the support you've shown, not only me as a brand new director, but this great agency, the GBI, and the men and women who drive the mission every day. Thank you for your support there. What I'd like to do briefly is talk a little bit about what we've accomplished in 2019, some of our concerns as we roll into 2020, and then answer any questions you may pose to me. Most of you in this room know that when we assumed the position of director in February, late February of 2019, we were tasked with looking at the issue in Georgia of criminal street gangs and what we might do to address that particular issue. One of the reasons why we wanted to address that was the FBI has told us for a number of years that anywhere between 48 to 90% of all violent crime, no matter where you're at in this country, urban, suburban, rural areas, are committed by criminal street gangs. Our intelligence unit, the GSAC unit, sent out a survey throughout the state asking law enforcement agencies what is the #1 problem you face as a law enforcement agency in this state, and that #1 issue was in fact criminal street gangs. So with those issues facing us, obviously if the GBI is the state investigative agency that has the ability to look at cases anywhere in the state, then we need to make sure we're involved in looking at gangs and what we can do about those. So in that vein, we established the first ever GBI gang task force. That should be calendar year 2019, fiscal year 2020. And so what we wanted to do with that is develop a full service task force that could help law enforcement and prosecutors around this state in addressing the issues. And we began developing strong partnerships with local, state, and federal partners. And also we developed regional gang specialists in every region in this state that the GBI has an office set up. So no matter where you are, if you're up in North Georgia in Region 1, down in Camden County in Region 14, we have an individual who is trained up in that particular office to work gang cases in what we call best practices and how to work them. And we also trained every boots-on-the-ground GBI agent in how we believe cases should be worked, what to look for, and how to go about putting those cases together that made them prosecutable cases. The next major task we looked at was a database, and I'm going to come back to it in just a moment and address it specifically. But with the task force, we also looked at currently charged and pending cases to make sure we hadn't overstepped or looked at our missed gang nexus for additional charges in the event they were appropriate. That task force began working what we call long-term cases across jurisdictional lines. And by that I mean if you had a case that may have started hypothetically in Baldwin County that then went to Coweta County, that then went to Cobb County, then went to Clark County, then we needed an agency or a force that could address that and not stop at a jurisdictional line, and that's what this task force is doing. Have the next slide, please. We also wanted to make sure that in working these cases, we trained individuals around the state, law enforcement individuals, prosecutors, folks who are involved in these cases and what we believe to be the best practices and how to address them. And so in a relatively short period of time, probably the last 6 or 7 months or so of calendar year 2019, we trained over 3,000 state, local, and federal law enforcement officers on gang investigation techniques and the application of these laws. This body has done a tremendous job in drafting the Georgia Criminal Street Gang Act. It's one of the best ones in the entire United States, and I commend you for doing that. So we wanted to make sure that individuals were aware of that in law enforcement, in the prosecution arena, and knew how to use that. So we've partnered with Georgia Gang Investigators Association in training over 3,000 of our partners around the state in a relatively short period of time. We also trained state and federal prosecutors on how to apply the techniques of this particular act. We've consulted with law enforcement and prosecution agencies across Georgia at all stages. And this is what I meant a moment ago when I said it was our goal to develop what I term a full service task force. And by that I mean no matter what stage a case is in, we wanted a body to be able to reach out to us and us to be able to provide help even at the beginning of a case, how you accumulate evidence, how you capture social media in a gang case, how to put a case together from the investigative point, to bring a task force or an agent in to actually conduct an investigation, to work with our prosecution colleagues and how to put that case together and what an indictment should look like. at the conclusion of the case, and also even to help and assist prosecutors in the appellate section of a case that had resulted in a conviction. So we wanted to provide all those full services, and we also went one step further. A little funny little inside joke, that bottom line, we initially had that GBI had taught judges, but some of my lawyer friends said, Vic, you probably don't want to say you taught judges anything, and so we went back to informing judges, and we've worked with them, particularly magistrate judges in the metro area, on what to look for and how to address particular issues in developing bond cases, and how to craft a bond with what the law says you can and can't do in those particular cases. So I think we did a really good job in 2019 of stepping out with a task force and leading the way in how to address criminal street gangs in this particular state. The database, as I mentioned a moment ago, is the next major task we'll be taking on with addressing criminal street gangs. I expect that to be operational extremely soon. I expect you to hear about it certainly before this session is over. And I'm very excited about that. What that is going to be a tool for law enforcement to use free of charge, where they'll be able to go in if hypothetically they were working a case against, I'm not a gang member, but if Vic Reynolds was a gang member and they were looking at me up in Fannin County, they could go online into this database and see whether or not any other law enforcement agencies were doing that as well. So it's able to connect those cases, connect the law enforcement partners around the state. So we're real excited about where that's headed as well. Next slide. Now, obviously, in order for us to be, in my opinion, as a director, where we need to be as an agency, the next major issue we have to look at in the GBI is addressing the issue of the GBI crime lab backlog. And I want to get a little bit in depth on that in just a moment, kind of tell you where the cases are. But, you know, the mission of the GBI hasn't changed much since it was developed. We're the investigative branch of the state law enforcement office. We do the scientific test. We are a repository for criminal information through GCIC. But my vision for this bureau, my vision for the GBI, is for us to become the best investigative state agency in the United States, not one of the best and not the second best. And the reality is we can't become what we want to become with these numbers. And so we have to address it. Some of you may know we have a brand new crime lab director. Cleveland Miles was named, I believe, in November, early December of last year, and he's taken on this task. He's going to do a tremendous job. And when Cleveland and I began to get to know each other and I made the decision to offer him that position, I told him that 2020 was about addressing crime lab issues, and we needed to do that. If you will look, you will see that in two sections, forensic biology and chemistry, about 77% of the cases that come into the crime lab are in one of those two areas. Chemistry is what it is. It's primarily drug identification, where we're identifying what type of drug is. Forensic biology has a number of areas that fit in there, including DNA testing, but those two areas alone encompass about 77% of what we do in the crime lab. When I stepped into the GBI in February of 19, we had a backlog, what we call a backlog of about a little over 37,000 cases. When I told Cleveland, I said, this is what we need to start addressing and find some ways outside of the box to address. Those numbers began going down. In fact, they were down in the 35,000 range before House Bill 470 kicked in and DCS sent us first offender cases to begin testing. They sent us over 8,000 at a pop, and so the numbers in forensic biology jumped back up to where they were down some 8,000 or so and popped back up and drove us up to the high numbers that we're looking at now in 44,000. You can check the next one. I do want you to know, too, is to be fully informed, this is a chart of where the cases are, and basically the age of them. As you will see, probably 46% or so of our cases are in the range of 31 to 180 days old. Even though we may call it, quote, a backlog, it's in that range of where it probably should be as far as the age is concerned. And if you look further up to from 0 to to 2 years, about 70% of the cases are in that category. So around 7 out of every 10 of our cases are 2 years or less that have been with us. The ones I'm primarily concerned about are the other 30%, and I will tell you in a moment how I think we can address those and some things we're beginning to do in the lab about those. But those are the numbers that we're looking at, particularly up, if you look at the top, the 13% at the very beginning in the 2 and 11% categories. Those are cases that range anywhere from 3 to 6 years old. I will tell you, as a former prosecutor, you shouldn't have a case in your office that's old, with the exception of perhaps maybe a death penalty case. And so what we're going to start doing, particularly with those older cases, is we're going to start contacting the agencies that submitted those cases to us to say, you know, we haven't heard anything from you. What do we need to do? What do you want to do with these cases? And I've tasked Cleveland with that idea to begin doing that. Next slide, please. Some other ways we're addressing these issues at the crime lab backlog, as I said a moment ago, we have to think outside of the box in this area. We have to look at things that perhaps haven't been looked at before. I'm very, very supportive of outsourcing some of the things we do at the lab. I think it's an appropriate thing to do, and I think it can accomplish some goals of getting these cases down. For example, we've been blessed to receive a Coverdell grant to help us with drug identification. I expect to push out between 1,900 to 2,000 cases of drug identification to outsourcing labs to do that work with that particular money. We also have been blessed to receive over $1 million DNA backlog reduction grant. I expect some probably 1,400 cases or so before it's over to be pushed out to other labs to assist us with that as well. We will continue to look for grant money to do that. I believe very strongly that outsourcing will work on these two areas of drug identification and DNA testing, and we'll continue to look for that grant money, but I'm very confident that both those areas will help us reduce the numbers as well. Another charge that I gave to our new lab director is, let's take a long, deep dive into how we do our operations there. What can we do to make it better? And as we're concentrating on chemistry, drug ID, and forensic biology sections, we're beginning to do what we call process mapping, and I know most of you who have business backgrounds know what that is, so I won't go into great detail, but we're looking at how we do business in those areas, how we take the test the items in, how they proceed along each step, and we're looking at that through process mapping. We did that with our toxicology section a number of years ago before I became director, and it was very successful in reducing the numbers in toxicology down to a manageable amount, and so we'll continue to do that as well. I'm confident that process mapping will help us in that regard as well. We've also made some adjustments to the way we train scientists. Let me tell you what I mean by that. For years, what we would do in training a scientist is we would basically say, you need to learn steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 before we are going to allow you to test these items. And we'd put them through a rigid training program. Some of those training programs may take more than a year. So what we've started doing now is if we train a scientist in perhaps steps 1 and 2, but not yet trained in 3, 4, and 5, we allow them to do steps 1 and 2. We put them to work doing those steps. So incrementally, as they begin to be trained up the way the GBI expects our scientists to be, is putting them to work as they learn the tools of the trade and how to do these things and meeting our qualifications and standards. So we hope to begin seeing some fruits of that labor as well as they begin working cases depending on what stage of their training they happen to be. We'll also be creating 3 distinct service teams based on the evidence categories. In other words, they'll be working cases in team situations depending on what section they're in, and we're confident that that will, in fact, help us tackle these cases and cut down on some of those numbers as well. So that's some of the things we're doing a little bit outside of the box in addressing the crime lab backlog. Next. As far as the operations of the GBI is concerned, in coming up with the reductions that we have, we took a long look at what we were doing inside of the Bureau, vacant positions that we expected to address through retirement and things of that nature in the future, and that's how we came up with the positions that are going to be eliminated through this budget process. I've broken it down through administration and CGIS. You will see in CGIS one of the areas at the top, replacing state funds with other funds. What we've done there is, for a number of years, we performed some operations that I believe are outside of what the GBI should be doing. We'll be stopping some of those operations. We'll be sending them back to the respective agencies that ought to be doing them, and I think that will work, and look forward to doing that as well. Again, it breaks down each department about the number of folks, vacancies that we're not going to be filling in the future, both in amended 20 and in fiscal year 21, which would be the next slide. Also talks a little bit about the task force that we've developed beginning in fiscal year 20. The database that will be coming online, we expect sometime, hopefully before this session is over. And that's what we've done. I can't begin to tell you enough what a great agency the GBI is, how, again, distinctly honored and humbled I am to be a small part of it and to lead these men and women for the job they do day in and day out. I thank them, and I thank you for your support as well. So, Mr. Chair, if you want some questions, I'll be more than happy to address them.
We've got a few.
Yes, sir.
Representative Holcomb, let's start off with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning,
Yes,
Director
sir.
Reynolds. The General Assembly has worked very hard over the last few years to, among other things, address the backlog of sexual assault kits. And as you know, the backlog was finished to be tested back in November of 2018. However, the data that has been provided by GBI from that time, 2017, the average monthly reports or number of kits were between 150 and 170. 2018 and 2019, GBI received approximately 250 kits per month. And for the most recent year, the numbers were approximately 200 kits per month. So I'm concerned about the potential cuts to the scientists and the technicians, because those are skills that are not very quickly gained. And so can you tell us a little bit about the impacts, both generally on your mission to combat crimes, because DNA evidence, of course, is also used to help solve crimes other than sexual violence crimes, but then specifically to address the impact on sexual violence in terms of how this will impact testing on both an expedited basis and a non-expedited basis. And just to give one final bit of context and color to why I'm asking this, I've spent a lot of time with victims, and I know some that had the kits been tested more timely, they were attacked by individuals whose DNA was already in the CODIS database. So the efficiency with which we test really matters. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the question. I will tell you, as of yesterday, in checking with crime lab personnel, obviously regarding Senate Bill 304, all of those sexual assault kits were tested, have been tested. We, as of yesterday, have 768 sexual assault cases, kits pending in the crime lab, and our numbers receiving of a little over 200 a month. That's about 3.5 months or so of sexual assault kits that we need to start addressing. I will tell you again, too, we have a circumstance where within the lab, we always address priority cases. For example, if DAs, one contacted me yesterday and said, I'm in a situation where I have to have something tested by a certain date, we take that and we place it at the top of the list. We don't particularly like to do that, but we do that because it's necessary, having been a former prosecutor. I'm confident that we have a handle on sexual assault cases. As I said, we have 768 pending. In a perfect world, I wish we had none pending, but with those numbers, considering the volume that we do, our DNA personnel have told me they're confident they can handle it as well, so I feel like we're in a good position on those cases.
Representative Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to follow up again and just emphasize what Representative Holcomb has said. You know, on this, there's a lot of bipartisan common ground on this issue, and the issue is not merely the rape kits and the testing of those kits, to ensure that the criminals that are detected and found in the CODIS system are prosecuted in a timely manner, but that is also to protect the public from future criminal activities by those same individuals. In addition to that, the complaints that I'm hearing throughout the state from prosecutors is that there is the backlog on both the chemical testing as well as the biological testing is hindering their ability to prosecute cases in a timely manner. And I have great concern with the cuts in this budget for those scientists. As a General Assembly, we have worked diligently to add more and more scientists, to increase pay, to recruit them for that purpose. I think it is especially important that this be analyzed thoroughly. I do appreciate, however, that you are looking for outside assistance in this regard. The concern there is, again, the chain of custody with respect to that evidence and the ability of the individuals who do the testing to be able to be called and testify in those criminal trials. Those are two essential elements that are not discussed here in terms of providing the information, but are essential in terms of prosecution. So I'm echoing Representative Holcomb's comments. I'm underscoring the importance that we feel, I think, as a representative body of the public of these positions, and I'm urging that your department work diligently on finding those alternative methods, but making sure those alternative methods are meaningful in terms of prosecution.
Thank you. I know it's not a question, but I will, if you indulge me to address that. As a former prosecutor, former police officer, and now as a director of the GBI, you know, our job is to make sure in the end that justice is done, and certainly a big part of that is having a crime lab that's responsive, that handles cases in a timely fashion. As I told you a moment ago, as far as I'm concerned, in this calendar year 2020, this is at the very top of my list. We did a lot of work in 2019 on the issue of gangs, and we have more work to do there, but there's no issue to me any more important today than addressing the issues in the crime lab. And I commit to you and commit to this body unequivocally and categorically, not only as a director of the GBI, but as a man, I give you my word, I will do the very best I can to make sure those issues are looked at from top to bottom, and I'll confirm that to Representative Holcomb as well.
Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the director, you've talked a lot about the gang task force and the problem. Can you quantify for us what that problem looks like, and how are you going to measure success? When will we get to success?
I will tell you that our friends and colleagues in the Georgia Gang Investigators Association, and that's a group that I have a good bit of confidence in. I've worked very closely with them, both as district attorney and now as a director, sent out surveys in the state of Georgia to all law enforcement agencies in the summer of 2018, received numbers back from them indicating that we were looking at somewhere around 71,000 validated gang members in the state of Georgia. I know you've probably already heard from Commissioner Ward. I don't know if you've heard from Commissioner Nell as well. My communication with them indicates somewhere 14,000, 15,000 individuals in the state prison system who have been validated gang members, another 14,000 or so who are on probation or parole, so that's 100,000 individuals. I think the way we look at success is a couple of ways. I think one is that we have an obligation as law enforcement officers and as prosecutors that if there is a case where somebody commits a crime motivated by his or her gang involvement, that we charge that crime and we prosecute that crime. What we've done for years, Madam Representative, is I don't mean this in a disrespectful sense because we did it ourselves, we stepped over those cases. For example, if somebody committed a homicide or an armed robbery or a drug offense as a member of Ghostface Gangsters or as a member of Rolling 20 Crips or Suriano 13s, what we would frequently do is we would take that case and we would prosecute the underlying offense. We would take the gang case and either not charge it, plead it away, or do something with it. We cannot do that and face this issue head on. And the second way we have to measure success is something that the GBI is probably beyond what the GBI is statutorily authorized to do, but what we as a society have to do. We have to give options to these 14, 15-year-old kids who these gang memberships are being placed in front of, and they have to convince them they have another route to go. one of the things that I was very, very proud of in Cobb County, and I would strongly urge this body to take a look at it for your various communities, is a court that was set up in juvenile court to take potential new gang members and pull them out of that lifestyle and put them into a different lifestyle. And that's something that I supported as the district attorney up there. That's what we have to do from a community, societal perspective. You know, as I've said before, on drug epidemics, you don't arrest your way out of an epidemic. You don't. Doesn't mean that law enforcement doesn't need to be tough. They need to be charged the particular charges that are appropriate. But in the end, societally speaking, community speaking, churches, organizations of that nature have to step up and do what they need to do in their community to make sure those individuals have that opportunity. I think those are the two. We have to arrest folks who commit crimes, particularly on gang-related crimes. But I think not as law enforcement officers, but as human beings, as members of this society, as residents of this state, we have to look at each other and look at these kids and make sure we do whatever we can do to give them an opportunity to choose another lifestyle rather than a gang lifestyle.
Senator Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Reynolds, a couple of things, a couple of cuts you didn't address that I would really appreciate you speaking to. There are two cuts under the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. So it doesn't have anything to do with your presentation. But specifically, one deals with proposed cuts in terms of grants with respect to accountability courts. For amended FY 2020, it's 1.3 million. For proposed 2021, it's over 2 million cuts in terms of accountability courts. And then with respect to what you were just talking about an initiative that you were proud about in Cobb County with respect to the juvenile justice system, there seems to be a cut under there with respect to the juvenile justice grants that are given to local governments. So if you could explain a little bit more what those cuts are and why you felt they were necessary.
Yeah, excuse me. I don't mean this in a disrespectful sense. I know you and I are neighbors, and thank you for your work you do up in Cobb. I think it would be appropriate to ask that of Director Neal, Jay Neal, who runs the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Again, I'm not passing the buck. I generally don't do that, and I apologize if it appears that way, but I think he needs to address the issues to that particular agency. Administratively, it's attached to us, but he runs that agency. I do not. I'm not avoiding your question, ma'am. I just think that's who needs to address it.
Maybe one more question before our time runs out. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I appreciate what you do. I think our governor's made a lot of good appointments, but I was extremely excited when he put you in this spot because of the job I thought you could do, and I appreciate that. Thank you for your focus on the crime lab. That is one of the things that has vexed us, I think, as a collective body for many years now, and I appreciate that focus. Being from the Augusta area, we hear a lot about SLED in South Carolina and what they do. Their equivalent of, I think, what the GBI is Georgia. And I think you mentioned the word outsourcing, but that was my question. I hear constantly that SLED does use a private crime lab in Newberry, South Carolina, to quite often resolve some of their issues with backlogs. Could you touch upon what you meant by outsourcing, and might that be something that we could do in part to Georgia to help the backlog?
You know, SLED is a tremendous agency. Assistant Director Kirk's son is a proud agent over there with SLED and does a great job. But yeah, you know, Representative Fleming, what we have to do is, as I said a moment ago, and as I've charged our new crime lab director with, we have to go outside of the box on these things. Outsourcing, and Representative Welch made a good point. The concern with outsourcing as a prosecutor is, first of all, I want to make sure this lab has the same standards as the GBI crime lab. The second is we need to make sure as a prosecutor and as a lab, if we outsource it, that the chain of custody is followed appropriately, because as he pointed out a moment ago, that has to be provable as an element in a court of law. And the third thing is, how do we get that individual who has tested that particular item to court to testify in regards to what he or she may have found? I will tell you, as a practical point of view, and this is after years of prosecuting and years of being in the system, that the majority of drug cases, the majority of drug cases, once they're tested, will not result in a trial. It doesn't mean that all of them don't, but the majority of them will not. I've heard defendants tell lawyers, our lawyers do their job and tell their clients, we can't work this case out until I know it's cocaine or I know it's methamphetamine. And so our job is to identify that, and I'm confident that will move cases along if we identify them. On the cases that have to be tried, we need to make sure, and I will commit to you again, that we're sending them to the labs, appropriate labs. We're not going to send them to anybody who has qualifications that are not appropriate to what our standards are, not appropriate to what our chain of custody requirements are going to be. But again, I think we're at a point now with this lab where we have to take a serious deep dive into outsourcing, and that's what we intend on doing. Thank you.
We've run out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, a few of you, 6 or 7 of you, didn't get your question answered. I'm sure the director will be glad to answer them out in the hall. Appreciate you coming very much, Mr. Reynolds. Colonel McDonough stands between us and lunch, so Colonel, come on up.
Good morning, y'all.
Welcome, Colonel. Glad to have you. The floor is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're leaving, please leave quietly. If you're coming in, please come in quietly. Quiet, continue. And thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Happy New Year to all of you. I was told to be quick, so put your seatbelts on. And this needs to be a hand-free environment, so if you'd put your cell phones up, pay attention, that'd be great. All right, you got to start with the car. 2 years in a row, the best-looking patrol car in the country. So you got to start with the car. Next slide. And then you got to end with the dog. Everybody loves the dog, so you see the work that folks do around here. Next slide. I'd like to start off with a favorite part of my organization, and that's our aviation program. And we are looking to consolidate our aviation program for some savings. And if you look at the slide, you can see for 2020, the reduction is $184,000, and for 2021, it's a little over $400,000. What we're doing to accomplish this is we have 7 hangars around the state. 2 of the hangars we're going to try to idle down to only an emergency use for the savings there. 3 of our helicopters we're going to sell. 1 helicopter and 1 Cessna are public use aircraft that we have from the federal government. We're going to be turning those back in. We will be purchasing 1 single replacement helicopter with the 3 that we sell. We're purchasing a flight simulator. And what's important about the simulator, we can do on the ground for so many hours at a much less cost of what we've been doing in the air. And then we're going to be implementing some spending caps across the board. We've asked our folks to reduce their P-card purchase by 25, no out-of-state type travel, reduce their PO purchase by 10%, and they've risen to the occasion. We've asked for 25, and they've done 35 and 37 and 38, so they're rising to that challenge. I put 2 pictures in here to give you a sense of when we do spend money on aviation, what we try to do is have a standardized helicopter that can do everything that a helicopter can do for law enforcement. What you see here is 2 of our Bell 407s. They're in what's called the dip. They're getting water to put on a fire. That's a Bambi bucket. Each one of them is FLIR equipped, forward-looking infrared radar, along with a night scope that's on it. And you'll see in the next picture, they can also do what's called long line rescue. This is the High Falls rescue that we did, where the brother fell down the falls and was killed. The other brother went down to his brother's body, and we had to get the body out as well as get his brother out. But when we spend money on a helicopter, we try to do everything that we can to make sure that it can do everything that's required of it as far as a law enforcement mission is concerned. Next slide. Our departmental administration for amended 2020 is a reduction of $75,000, and then again in 2021, we're doing that by reducing an accounting position and in the same fashion implementing spending cuts. Next slide. This is a lead into our field operations. Past 5 years, we've been very, very active in civil disturbance. This is at Ivan Allen and William Street. This was what it looked from the back side of the crowd. Next slide. This is what it looked like to us looking in the other direction. In addition to that mission, the folks do hurricane-type response and other things, you know, in addition to their daily duties with law enforcement duties as far as traffic enforcement. But for fiscal year amended 2020, the reduction is 4.9 million and some change, and then in 2021, it's 5.5 million. When you look at who our basic employee is, that is a Trooper First Class 3. The cost of that individual with their fringe is about $100,000. Those figures equate to about 49 troopers for amended 2020 and 55 troopers in 2021. Now, my goal is not to eliminate those positions. My goal is to save everywhere I can so that I can keep as many people on the road as possible. The fact of the matter is a reduction in trooper force on the roadway equates to an increase of fatalities. Anytime that we've had to reduce folks on the roadway, our fatalities go up. So our goal is to do everything we can to save money in every other area to try to put towards these numbers to actually minimize any reduction of individuals on the roadway. Next slide. SWAT is a function of them as well. I wanted you to see this slide because the last time I've spoke, we've actually increased what is known as our Bearcat capability. They are essentially an armored vehicle that protects our folks. And if you've got to make entry into a home, it's nice to be able to stand behind something instead of getting shot at. The next slide is a new program that we are implementing, the use of drones across the state in different areas, primarily in our accident reconstruction. We have 36 to 39 investigators that are all now drone equipped. Why is this important? Well, if you've been in a traffic jam because they're trying to get the roadway cleared and it's a fatality, you hear that, you know it's going to be a long period of time. That investigative element, usually of just being in the roadway, the investigators are there for about an hour to an hour and a half. With the use of this drone, they can use that technology to map the scene aerially, and they can usually be out of the roadway in about 20 minutes. So you can see how that would speed up the time of getting traffic moving. I mentioned hurricane response, but I particularly like where the hat is placed on the tree as he's trying to get it out of the roadway there. Our motorcycle continues to do their job in and around Atlanta, specifically inside of I-285. Their job is to get to the accidents and get them out of the way so that we can continue with our open roads type effort. Moving on to our motor carrier compliance division, our reductions for 2020 is a little over $800,000, and for 2021, we're actually having an addition of 1.1. What's important about 2021 with that addition in your support is we've had an agreement with the Port Authority over the past 5 years that they have supplied us money for motor carrier officers along the coast and I-16 and then around Atlanta for the impact that the ports have with trucks on the roadway with us coming into the port. So these are funds to replace that agreement which is going away. But we'll achieve the reductions by not filling vacant weighmaster positions at our weigh stations and the same spending caps that we've asked everybody else to do. Next slide just shows the average guy inspected a tractor trailer along one of the interstates. Anybody want to switch with them? All right, and the next slide shows the school bus inspection element of the Motor Carrier Compliance Division. All the school buses in our state are inspected by them on an annual basis. But the reason I put this in here is because you'll remember the piece of legislation that y'all passed this past year for the school bus safety program. We partnered with DDS. Now we have the ability at any time to be able to query the driver's licenses of all of our bus drivers in this state. So if there's been a suspension for DUI or a suspension for points or activity that has occurred that's affected their license, we can remove a dangerous school bus driver off of the roadway. Next slide. Another capability of the Motor Carrier Compliance Division is our nuclear radiological detection team. They have the ability through ground means and equipment to detect any nuclear or radiological material that may be transiting our roadways. They can also help in special events to make sure that we don't have a dirty bomb type incident. Next slide is for the Office of Public Safety and Officer Support. The reductions in 2020 are $503,000, and in 2021 it's a reduction of $238,000. And essentially we've made those reductions because in starting that office up, we haven't been able to hire folks as quickly as possible, so we've designated those positions for those reductions. This is also legislation that y'all were very supportive in, House Bill 703. This is the peer support effort to all public safety, so that we have people that are like-minded, that when we have people in public safety that are having problems, this office specifically helps them. It's basically public safety's EAP with folks that have actually done the job. If you have a police officer that goes to an average social worker, that connection's not going to be there. But if you have a police officer to go to a fellow like we've got from Henry County that we've just hired, that has 8 years, 3 deployments to the United States Marine Corps, 8 years with Henry County, and he's been involved in 2 officer-involved shootings, I think there can be a rapport there that hopefully they can work their problems out. Last thing I'd like to finish up with is our bond requests. We're asking for 308 vehicles this year, which is about $13.1 million. Facility maintenance is $705,000 to continue our annual maintenance, which includes over 70 GSP facilities, 20 weigh stations, and all of our towers in our communication system. And the last is the construction of our new headquarters building at just over $54 million. We were given last year $2.9 million in planning bond funding. We've put that to good use. Stevenson Wilkinson has already been hired as our design team. Turner Construction is our construction folks. And in the next slide, we show where the site's going to be on the old Public Safety Training Center. And the next slide shows the use of SWAT equipment to aid in the demolition of that building so we don't spend so much taxpayer money. And then the next slide shows you the complete of that building being down. So, Mr. Chairman, I've tried to move it along. The last thing I want to end up with is our community involvement. We're very proud of our partnership with Toys for Tots. This started with the former Commissioner, Colonel Bill Hitchens, in 2009, and since then we've collected almost 500,000 toys and about $800,000 in monetary donations. Any questions? And you got about 2 minutes before lunch.
Okay. Lumpkin? Representative Lumpkin.
Colonel, thank you for being here. Right here, right here, right here. Could you comment on the cyber attack and how it's affected things?
Yes, sir. As most of you know, back in July, it was the 27th, we were hit with a ransomware. We did not pay the ransom, but that headed us down the road to find ourselves in a position of recovery for almost 4 months. The positive thing is very quickly our new troopers went back to the way troopers did their job on the roadway before, and that was all handwritten reports, all handwritten citations. But our computer-aided dispatch system is back up. The computers in the car are back working. We're down to individual type fixes now instead of overall, and our weigh in motion system on all of our weigh stations. In about 5 weeks, all of that will be back up. The positive aspect of that, this body twice supported us in 2 elements in our technology upgrades. The last one is when you funded brand new servers for us, and also for the speed upgrade and the takeover a portion of our system by the Georgia Technology Authority. What came with that was an insurance policy that aided us in the recovery of all of this. So that move that was supported by this body put us in a position that when this happened, we had insurance coverage, because without it, it would have been a very, very costly endeavor.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. The number of positions that you said would be frozen or eliminated in the fiscal year 2020 budget was 49, and then 55, if I heard you correctly, on the 2021 budget. About when did you decide to make those determinations as to, well, two things. One, the vacancies that you're determining, is it based upon an age, how long they've been sitting out there, and if so, how long? And then secondarily, when did you figure out how many vacancies you would cut per year?
It's strictly by the dollar figure. I mean, we're in a continual process of recruitment, and we're in a continual process of training. It takes us 7 months to put a trooper through trooper school. Right now, we try to have 3 schools that start per year. And so we've got a very robust recruitment aspect. And so not that I can fill everything, but essentially where we bump our head is that 860 number that we have talked about. And so right now, 814 is where we were as the 31st of December. So we've got a school that's in right now with 32 folks, and then we've got one that's scheduled to start in February, trying to get back to that 860 number. But the fact of the matter is we're not keeping pace with our attrition. Slowly but surely, we're getting eaten away in our position. So the dollar figure of the cut divided by what we spend on a trooper essentially comes up with what that position counts is. If we had that money, our goal would be to fill those. So that's where that figure comes from.
So it's just a mathematical equation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So my concern with all this is that we in the House and our staff have been asking since actually the end of September to understand where DPS would make its cuts. And we have sent series and series of emails making requests for that information. And it really was just a mathematical equation to determine how much was going to be cut and then how many positions would be frozen or eliminated. And it's not until today that we actually received a position number or count. And so since it's a mathematical equation, it doesn't appear that the cyber attack would have affected it. And I'm presuming that the cyber attack did not affect cell phone communications or email communications, because I have not received anything back from the department via my own text or my own communications or those emails that I've seen. I'm troubled by that. I'm troubled by that lack of communication.
Mr. Chairman, I know
that you and I and our committee has worked together to try to identify pay raises for the department. We've worked diligently on those issues. But we've got to have transparency. We've got to have the public as representatives elected by the public to represent their interest and to oversee this budget. We've got to have that communication. It's got to go, it's got to happen, it's got to be responsive, it's got to be timely. That has not occurred over the last 4 months. I don't think the cyber attack is the reason, and I hope that you will address it.
Mr. Chairman, the figures that are in here are the governor's recommendations. Those recommendations are calculated by the Office of Planning and Budget. We have repeatedly asked for those and have asked that they be given to you, because those calculations are our calculations. It's as simple as that. Representative Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Y'all are the gold standard in Georgia. I want to say that. You set the bar for law enforcement, and we've seen that year and year again. But there's one issue that I think is concerning all of us, and a lot of us, should I say, and that goes back to motor carrier compliance, and you and I have talked about this. I also noticed that in GDOT's budget, there's an additional $15.8 million.
Yes, sir. It's not an additional, it's actually a replacement, Representative Knight. What they've done is taken from House Bill 170, those motor fuel funds, and replaced state tax dollars with the funds that come from that to the DOT.
Okay. But here's the thing, and we keep over and over again, all of the trucks and commercial vehicles that are pulled over on the interstate, it's happening in our agricultural communities, it's happening in our communities. Again, I keep hearing that the purpose is public safety, to make sure these vehicles are compliant. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. They do a regulatory function for the federal motor carrier rules and regulations. We are the people that are responsible in this state for that. The stops that they make are usually inspection driven. although we also look at 5 issues that cause accident, and in our Stop the Threat program, they make stops based upon those type of things. But a lot of them are inspection driven.
Well, here's the point. If it's for all public safety, then why are only private vehicles being inspected versus the same vehicle that may be with a governmental, local governmental agency not being inspected? I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, their responsibility is all commercial motor vehicles. In other words, the CMV effort are those that are in the process of using that for making money. And so what's in that definition of commercial is where they lie in that 10,001 and above.
But the federal code says we're exempting all local jurisdictions and everything else. But the same trucks that are delivering, whether it be trash to a landfill, if it's a private carrier, they're getting stopped. If it's a governmental, local governmental unit, they're not getting stopped. So if the issue is for safety, the rules should apply across the board. That's the inconsistency. But even beyond that, and you and I have talked, and I think there's a lot of members in here, again, from across a lot of industries, that is one of the biggest and largest complaints when we see 5 and 6 a day sitting out on an interstate just pulling these guys over. And every time they're even checked, if they get a warning, nothing's wrong, they're taking up their time, money, and I understand that those are reported to the insurance and their insurance goes up.
That's correct, sir.
So again, it's one of the largest constituent complaints that I get time and time and time again. So
we try to drive that enforcement where we see areas where accidents occur and also by class of vehicle of trucks. And so a lot of their enforcement is specific to where the data is showing they need to be and the type of vehicles that they need to inspect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel, thank you so much for everything that you continue to do and all those that you're leading. We have worked for a long time on the new headquarters building, and thank you for the update. When do you believe that that new building will be fully operational for your team?
Right now, the projection is the 4th quarter of 2022 or the 1st quarter of 2023.
Outstanding. In the meantime, is that impacting your operations at all with what you're doing too?
No, sir. The way the site is on the backside of the property and the way that we're bringing vehicles in, I spoke to the DOT commissioner and basically asked him, is this impacting y'all in any around the SOC? And his response was, no, they haven't seen any impact, and I haven't received any complaints of some of the stuff that's been going on. So thus far, it's been pretty seamless, sir.
Thank you again for your great work, Colonel.
Yes, sir.
Representative Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel, I appreciate all that GSP does for us on a regular basis. Like many members of the legislature, I was really shocked whenever we had the break-in here at the Capitol. You know, communication was kind of spotty. I was wondering what enhanced security measures have been put in place here at the Capitol. Could you speak to that?
Yes, ma'am. The specific item that he used was the concrete base of the mouse traps that you see, the rat traps that you see around the building. And so as soon as that occurred, we met with the Georgia Building Authority. We did a complete review around, and all of that type of stuff is removed that could have been used or could be used in the future. Other type of things that we're looking at is that interior space when you walk up the steps underneath the arch is to actually put gates that can be closed during those off-type sections. GBA is also looking at software that any type of noise could be detected that would aid us in going to that area, whether it's broken glass, a large sound. So those are the type of things, first of all, starting with the exterior and the physical security. Things have been removed that could be used as problems. The look at the gating as additional to keep people out of those spaces when people are gone, and then the use of technology interior to the building so that if something does occur, we can be directed to the right location.
So the only change that's occurred as of yet is just the removal of rat traps, correct? As of right now, the only change that has occurred as a result of the break-in has been the removal of rat traps, correct?
That, and then if you look at the drainage areas that used to be, there were large boulders that were used as catch basins that could be used to thrown in windows. All of that type of stuff was removed. So the exterior of the building is what's been cleaned up. We're looking at even where the signage that could be picked up, that signage may be more physically secure that it couldn't be used. So those are the things that are being done.
So describe for me the presence of GSP and kind of securing the building before the break-in, the night of the break-in, and now. Is there any change?
Yes, ma'am. We've essentially drawn the circle closer to the Capitol. The Capitol Police Division has officers at nighttime that essentially are required to patrol and answer calls that were within a 5-mile radius of the Capitol. And so what we've done is taken that 5-mile radius and asked them to essentially start and maintain their patrol closer to the Capitol. So instead of being on the outskirts and answering that call to the Capitol, they're closer in and around to it.
Are there any, sorry to kind of belabor the point, but as far as communications are concerned, how is that communicated? How is it found out? And what was the communication with elected officials like myself?
Okay. The GBA actually runs a notification software that they put out messaging regarding things that occur in the Capitol. The actual radio room function or communication function is out at our headquarters. And so on that particular night, it was a safety officer that came into contact, and then that's how the information went from the safety officer to the police officer to the radio room. And then within a very short period of time, I think it was 3 minutes, the actual Capitol police officers that responded to that got here to the Capitol. So that's kind of the flow of the way it is. And then when it happens, that's communicated to the GBA, and then alerts are put out as quickly as possible.
Okay, all right. Well, I hope we can talk about it more offline, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So last question, Commissioner. So we're ready to roll. So break for lunch back at 1:30.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Back at 1:30, everybody. Rural Caucus is meeting across the street in the Department of Ag. So there's be lunch over there if you're not already committed.